Hello, everyone. Welcome to the International Conference on Design Futures 2021. My name is Chen Yu. I'm the PhD student at the Academy of Art and Design, Tsinghua University. I'm very pleased to be here and moderator of the conference. Firstly, I would like to introduce the organization of the conference This is a conference is hosted by Tsinghua University, co-hosted by Carnegie Mellon University, School of Design Carnegie Mellon University, and the Politecnico di Milano Design Department, organized by Academy of Art and Design, Tsinghua University, and the China-Italy Design Innovation Hub, Tsinghua University. And our partners include the Center for Global Competence Development, Tsinghua University, Department of Information Art and Design, Academy of Arts and Design, Tsinghua University, Art and Technology Innovation Base, Tsinghua University, and the Innovation and Opportunity Education Alliance of China. All right, let's move to the opening ceremony. Welcome the Vice President and Provost of Tsinghua University, Professor Yang Bin, to do the opening speech. Welcome.
尊敬的各位专家学者、老师们、同学们、朋友们，大家好！欢迎参加由清华大学主办的设计未来线上国际会议。本次会议将围绕设计未来的主题，从未来哲学、未来教育、未来创造、未来社会4个角度，探讨设计教育的前沿学术思路，并分享跨界创新实践。欢迎各位！进入后疫情时代，未来素养和设计预见已成为我们应对不确定性、增强社会与产业韧性与实现可持续创新的不可或缺的素质和能力。我们需要世界各国专家合作探索行动方案和实施路径。联合国教科文组织在去年12月举办的首届高级别未来素养峰会中提出，通过提高未来素养，我们需要运用新的方式、工具和途径来应对挑战，并提出切实可行的解决方案。此次会议希望能从学术的视角探究当前的不确定性，以远见引领变革，弘扬全人类共同价值，为建设一个更加美好的世界提供正确的理念指引和行动指南。清华大学关注前沿科研学术领域的发展，致力于为国内外教育、科研、人文领域的合作与交流搭建战略性平台，建设更开放、更融合、更具韧性的大学。本次会议由清华大学美术学院和中艺设计创新基地联合承办，美国卡耐基梅隆大学设计学院和意大利米兰理工大学设计系协办，体现了清华大学融合艺术与科技、文化与创新的力量，以美为媒，加强国际文化交流，为全球可持续发展做出贡献的愿景与行动。2021年10月30日，习近平主席在20国集团领导人峰会发表重要讲话时提出，罗马不是一天建成的，构建人类命运共同体需要世界各国不懈努力。道阻且长，行则将至，行而不辍，则未来可期。本次会议希望通过设计未来这一新兴学术领域，探索短期与长期 未来对当下社会的影响，通过未来思维引领产业变革与社会进化，以共创性模式、思辨性方法、反思性实践，设计更合意的未来，实现全球共享未来的愿景。延续首届会议的主旨，2021设计未来在线国际会议希望围绕未来哲学、未来教育、未来创造、未来社会4个主题，分别从哲学、美学、科学、社会学等领域来探讨设计未来的前沿思想、方法、工具与创新实践。未来哲学主题将面向后疫情思辨社会人文的挑战，未来创造主题则面向数字化，突破技术预见的边界。未来社会主题将面向共同体，构建价值共享的范式。未来教育主题则面向多样性，提升设计预见的能力。本次会议邀请了30余位国际知名的设计学、未来学、哲学、科学、教育学等领域专家学者，共同探讨后疫情时代人类共同面对的机遇与挑战，思考如何前瞻和应对复杂的社会问题，基于设计预见提出跨学科的发展策略。今天，来自世界各地的专家学者云端相聚，交流前沿学术成果，探讨跨界创新实践，是高等教育为全球可持续发展做出的一项非常有价值、有意义的举措。希望此次大会可以吸引更多创新力量加入设计未来这一前沿领域，携手应对挑战，共同建设持久和平、普遍安全、共同繁荣、开放包容、清洁美丽的世界。谢谢大家。
Thank you, Professor Yang. And next, we will invite the academic chair of the international conference, Professor Fu Zhiying. He is an associate professor at the Academy of Arts and Design, Tsinghua University. Welcome, Professor Fu, to introduce the conference. Welcome.
Hello, hello everyone. This is Jun Fu. On behalf of our co-chair, Peter Skupdi from Carnegie Mellon University, and Barbara from Polytechnic Milano, just quick to review the last year's conference. Last year, we held also 4 days conference, which focus on 4 different themes, and we have futures exploration, future empowerment, future theory, future trends. Okay, next. So during the 4 days, we have 28 keynote speakers, panelists, and also have 4 ideas lab. We have 20 young scholar journalists. They discuss the future related topic based on the online workshop. Last year, we have 80,000 participants which joined us online. So next. So this year, we also start this conference online, and we have 4 different themes, which is future philosophy, future creation, future society, future design education. Okay, next. So this year we have 11 keynote speakers, 20 panelists, and we have 4 different panels will present their thoughts and also the practice in the design future area. Next. So this year we also have a special module which named the academic symbiosis. We have 40 young researcher, PhD students will present their papers, which focus on the future study and also the future new design area. Okay, next. So this year we held a very special module, which is the Future Ideas Lab. We have 4 different topics: design the human engaged computing, future arts, new space economy, and also the future literacy. We have many young researchers will join us. I think during the Futures Ideas Lab, they will generate a lot of very interesting idea and also the concept how to solve the new challenge during the post-pandemic. So I hope this year's conference could bring you new thoughts, and also hope you can enjoy all the content from our speakers and panelists. Okay, thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Professor Fu. Thank you. Okay, all right. Let's move next part, the conference presentation. The session 1 is the futures philosophy, and the session is moderated by Zhang Li. She is Associate Professor at Guangdong University of Technology. Welcome, Professor Zhang Li. Hi, Zhang Li. Can you hear?
Hello, everyone.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Zhang Li, the moderator of the Future Philosophy session. Coping with the post-pandemic era, we have to look for new solutions to big problems, and we should use philosophical thinking for the future. To reflect on human existence, we need to establish a new concept and attitude to guide our future paths. In this session, we will have 2 keynote speakers and 4 panelists.
Sorry, Professor Zhang Li. You can't connect the. Hello. 是张离卡吗 ？Sorry. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Okay, sorry.
It's all right. Okay, you can continue. Yeah.
Okay. So now let me introduce our first distinguished speaker, Professor Sohail Inayatullah from Australia. He has many multiple identities. One of them is the chair of UNESCO Future Research, and he is also working at ZHANG Center for Sustainable Development and Humanity. And he is also professor of International Islamic University, Malaysia, and Tankang University in Taiwan. And he is a resident futurist at the Ministry of Culture and Tourism, Government of Abu Dhabi. And he is a researcher at the international think tank focused on creating alternatives and future research. Looking forward to your speech, Professor Sohail, so please.
Thanks so much for the invitation. I'm hoping you can hear me fine. Sound is okay?
Yes, great.
I will,
Great.
Fantastic. I will share screen. The organizers asked me to talk about futures in the time of disruptions, the 6 pillars approach. So normally I do many interactive workshops, but this is more like a lecture, and I hope that's okay. So I think the main thing as futurists, what we do, we focus on the changing world. And what we see is the acceleration of change, which is one part of it. The other side is the loss of agency, people feeling loss of control. That leads, as we're seeing everywhere, to anxiety and mental illness. So the goal, our goal is to find what's called a sweet spot of control. What things can I change? And you try to focus on them instead of trying to focus on things you can't change. So future studies is, yes, a methodology, but essentially it's about making a difference in the world. It's about changing the world in ways that lead to well-being for self, for nature, for society, and for the planet. Earlier, people thought we were strange. I started studying future studies in 1975 when I was a student in Hawaii. People thought we were very strange. Now, with the rate of change so quick, my colleague Anita Hazenberg, head of Interpol strategy, says, futures used to be nice to have. Now it's a capability one must have. Every department, every government, every business, every community, every school child must develop the capacity to think about the future. My colleague, Dr. Suzanne Roth, head of strategy at the Asia Development Bank, she's focused on bringing futures into the bank to help them move from infrastructure to knowledge solutions, to make the transition as Asian countries get richer, to have knowledge that makes a difference, knowledge that inspires, knowledge that helps us change. And so our futures work has helped the bank to fund the disruptions, move money towards solar energy, move money towards gender equity, move money towards well-being. So you use finances to create the future you wish to see. Now, how do you do this? It's clearly those of us who are academics, there's a research context. Context one is futures as empirical, as forecasting. Context two is futures as interpretive, as understanding the different meanings we give the future. Context three is critical, Foucauldian genealogy. What is not being said? Who gains, who loses? And the fourth type of research we have is called action research, learning by doing. You can start with empirical forecasting, but we always conclude with transformation. And why this is important, because as we know, who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. My colleague, Professor Milojevic, who I work with at MetaFuture, says, who controls the future controls the present. So we understand futures is about research, but it's also very political, and you want to understand what will the politics of the future look like so you can make better decisions today, so you can have a greater sense of control in your world. Now, one thing we've learned, if you assume one future, you'll make mistakes. We all have a vision of the future. We all have things that we think about the future. And the critical part is challenging those assumptions. An analysis of 83 cases of failed strategy said, why did they fail? Misleading assumptions. So future studies is a critical process to challenge my assumption, to challenge your assumption. One project we did with one of the biggest airports in the world, we started to think about what are our assumptions about airports. As the project went along, we moved from airports landing rights to retail, and then finally airports as places which becomes like a university, a living laboratory, for example, focused on 3D printing. The government of Egypt, we start to challenge our view, who should lead AI, who should lead manufacturing? And in one of their scenarios, they call the Alibaba transformation from the Chinese company Alibaba, talking about bring technology to the poorest of the poor, bring technology to the people on the street, bring technology so they can anticipate the future. As Rio Miller, my colleague at UNESCO, says, so futures literacy is enhanced. But not always we succeed. It's often because we're thinking about the past. We have the view of the past that defines our future. One of the largest companies I've been working with, they had funding to transform their company. They paid for a future scan, a horizon scan. But when it came down to making the change, they were unable to do so because they had a narrative. The story defines what design is possible, what design is impossible. And thus their narrative was the Queen Elizabeth ship has a monopoly, a hegemony, very difficult to turn. So we said, how do we change this? We came up with a better narrative. From Queen Elizabeth to the tugboat, the patrol boat. These patrol boats became action learning experiments to change the company, to change the external world. They started to look at solar energy. They started to look at transforming sewage. They started to look at apps that measure your energy. They started to look at cars that could run on sewage. So they went from a stable company to a disruptor company involved in innovation. Does this work? I've given you 2 examples. Is there empirical studies that futures thinking can be transformative? The answer is yes. My colleagues Renee Rohrbeck and Menes Itankun suggest that future preparedness is a powerful predictor of outperformance. Profitability jumps up 33%, market capitalization 200%. My colleague Professor Qiufan CHEN, brilliant Professor Chen, says it also is relevant to individuals. You become more transdisciplinary as you're doing here, design plus futures. You're more open to alternatives. You're more optimistic about the future, and your narrative shifts from a train to a boat in a large ocean, because you now can consider more assumptions, can create more alternatives. So what we try to do as a futurist, we try to learn from the future. It almost seems impossible until it's done, said the great Nelson Mandela. So our approach is called 6 pillars. It's a structured view of the future. We map it, we disrupt it, we time it, we deepen it, we create alternatives, and finally we vision and we go backwards. It's called backcasting, from vision to reality. So let me share you this approach. Hopefully this will help you in your own futures thinking. The first is called mapping. Mapping is the futures triangle. Futures triangle, for example, with one large museum we were working with, we said, what's the future? This is the future is the connected museum, the co-curated museum. That's the pull of the future. What's the push? The push is the changing needs of customers, new technologies, the external environment. These are young people don't want a boring museum, they want an exciting museum, what's now called the metaverse. What's stopping it? Well, the professor of curation. Our strategic plan focused on the present. So once you develop this map, you can see where do you change? Where do you control? Do you make the image more exciting, more compelling? You focus on the pushes, or do you stop the weight of history? You challenge the weight of history. You find ways to make change. So we call this challenging the youth future. I was in Beijing 2 years ago working with the National Reform Commission, and we said, what's the future of education in the PRC? And the conclusion was, it's like a used future right now. It's like the factory. School is like a factory. When new technologies come in, students still sit in rows like a factory. In the Asian style, it's learning just for learning. And the imagination of this becomes 100 years ago. It's learning not for learning, but for a job. You can see the students are passive, as in they're sitting there having ideas fed to them. They're not creating the future. My colleague Ivana Miljevic, her book, Educational Future, explores this. So we have to change the factory. When I was with the Ministry of Education in Norway, they said, let's move it from the factory to the jazz orchestra. The minister conducts. Students focus on excellence, but they also cooperate so a new future can be created. Ministry conducts, individual excellence and cooperation, so novelty emerges. We're working with one local school, Brisbane Grammar School. We started working before COVID-19. They want to develop hybrid education, virtual education, trusted education, teach by problems. This was supposed to be a 10-year vision, but COVID-19 pushed them. It pushed them quickly into the future, and suddenly they're teaching by problems. They're focused on well-being. So the first thing we do in futures is map it, but the map changes as we're disrupted. The methodology we use is emerging issues analysis, invented by Graham Alter in the 1950s. Most prime ministers, most CEOs focused on problems. The big companies focus on trends. Futures, we focus on the emerging issues. High impact, but still low data. We use this to transform the future. These are seeds of possible change. This is impossible. But when I was in the 1980s doing research with Professor Johan Galtung, we talked about it in 1984. We published a piece suggesting that China will probably be the next world center by 2020. So we could already see the seeds of change in the 1980s from the rise of the tigers, rise of Japan, and we hypothesized China is next. We also in the 1970s and 80s talked about the legal rights of robots, moving towards the AI society. 20 years ago, we talked about cellular revolution, the rise of in vitro meat. And we're seeing this now everywhere. China, Saudi Arabia, it's cheaper. Every home will have a 3D printer printing its food because it will help us solve climate change. We also talked about zoonosis. Will this mean the end of factory farming? We see from COVID-19 and many other zoonotic diseases, they're created as we enter wildlife zones. Will we see the rise of veganism globally? Clearly, something will change. The real change suggests food will become software. AI-driven food will be a far more distributed local food system. So we're seeing a basic disruption in the food system. But then what might this lead to? We don't quite know. This is where we use the methodology, the futures wheel. Option one, large companies will take over cellular agriculture like Tyson Foods. Option two, there'll be endless new startups like Beyond Meat, Impossible Foods. Option three, we'll see the end of red meat as risk mitigation becomes far more important. Option four is become the disruptor by the science, disrupt the disruptors. So we look at what are possibilities and we say, what are the implications? These implications, because they look at alternatives, they become possible strategies. They inform policy for the prime minister, the president, the cabinet. But when do you do this? And we call this timing the future. There's multiple patterns here. In a series of books, one with Professor Galtung, we talked about the big patterns of change, looking at Qiufan CHEN in the Zhijie, Ibn Khaldun, the Muqaddimah, Arnold Toynbee, his book on history, Gibbons on the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. But critical here's the work of P.R. Sarkar. He suggests that life is like a cycle. Workers, warriors, intellectuals, accumulators of capital. Each one goes too far. Capitalists oppress workers and intellectuals. Intellectuals take power from warriors. Each one tries to create hegemonic power, but the cycle continues. The goal of a good society is to create the new leadership that can protect, that can innovate, that can use finance wisely. If we do this, then we have a possibility in this great transition we're involved in, towards renewables, towards gender equity, towards the new meat. We can either fragment and become more and more tribal, as we're seeing today. We saw with Trump, with Bolsonaro, with Modi in India, or we can become a complex adaptive system and create a real global governance system. This is the opportunity of future studies helping us think about the long term. But as we think of the long term, we all have different views. Some may prefer nation states, some may prefer tribes, some may prefer a planetary system. These different perspectives are best understood through a methodology called causal layered analysis. Causal layered analysis. We invented it in 1992. It's been 30 years of research, and we have 2 books, CLA Reader, CLA 2.0. And we develop a different type of research. Research level 1 is the litany, the article in the newspaper. Level 2 are the systemic causes. Level 3 is the culture, the worldview. Level 4 is the metaphor. In CLA, we don't stay at level 1. We go deeper and deeper. With COVID-19, what are the causes? Wildlife, going into wildlife areas. Why is that? Because we have a worldview of West knows best, urbanization, humans at the center. So what's the metaphor? The metaphor is, of course, West knows best. So the worldview is encroaching into wildlife. The system is our urbanization design. Mayors pushing this, developers trying to profit from it. The data is a disease. So this is go deeper and find the real solution. So there's real transformation. The deepest part of this is metaphor, narrative, what's called level 4 analysis. Why do we do this? Because we want to ensure our strategy succeeds. Otherwise, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we have to create stories that serve us in our way forward. We know from research, if you have 2 groups of people and you tell them there's 10 criminal elements in your neighborhood, 10 in your neighborhood, but you change the metaphor. Group 1, you say crime is a beast. Group 2, you say crime is a virus. Then you ask them, what should you do with your money, with your funding? If you say it's a beast, they'll say catch and jail criminals. If you say it's a virus, put money in education. The metaphor is directly correlated to the policy response. Strategy does not just come from data, strategy comes from story. Thus, we have to be better storytellers. Most of us are unconscious about this. When they ask the participants in the survey, why did you decide to put money in education or in prisons? They said because of the data, but the data was the same. The metaphor was in fact what made the difference. If you look at Brexit, even though in every scenario, UK loses money, the metaphor of take charge, it's not fair, was victorious over the data about scenarios. May kept on saying, it's not fair, take charge of your life. Stories can be victorious. Jacinda Ardern, the most important leaders on the planet today, she created the story of a team of 5 million, and she linked it, as PRC has done, to science-based evidence, to border community control, and of course, the most important thing, inclusion of minorities, inclusion of Maori, a team of 5 million moving forward. Government of Singapore has used CLA to develop their 2030 vision. The data about empirical data, systemic data, worldview data, and metaphor data. When they interviewed elders, they said, young Singaporeans are like strawberries. It looks nice, but easy to bruise. Young people had a different view about the future. We've also used this to understand law enforcement. Work we've done with law enforcement agencies. Something that emerged was, why is their national cyber crime strategy failing? And what came out very quickly there was it was failing because they didn't understand the stories of others. As they began to understand the stories of others, they understood the user is different from their privacy advocate, is different from the corporation, is different from the police, is different from government. So CLA helps develop a meta map of strategy. So then the goal is to ensure all stakeholders are in the room. The stakeholders are present. So you find a more inclusive narrative, a better story, which helps you succeed. A colleague of mine, he's done a CLA on what's wrong with the world economy. He says right now the design is a house that cannot last because the system is capitalism that denies nature. The worldview is markets are the only solution. The metaphor is world is as a machine. His suggestion is the world is not a machine. It's an emergent ecology, a garden perhaps. Markets are not the solution, they're useful. We must limit, we must respect the limits of nature. We must have a home that lasts 100 years. So CLA is a way to deepen our strategy. With energy companies, we move from keep the lights on to we must connect your home and community as we all become consumers and producers. As we go from monopoly to a distributed energy system, the energy company has to change its strategy from the energy producer to the connector. But CLA can also be used for the self. This is not just about understanding the external world. Futures wants to understand our inner world, what's called the self-reflective practitioner. The self-reflective practitioner. One CEO I was working with coaching, he said his life was easy. His metaphor was playing tennis. He was excellent, but then the world changed. People's expectations changed, cultures changed. And now he felt he goes into a meeting and never knows what type of meeting it will be. So he changed the story to the man, the person who could play on multiple courts, as you see in this image, grass and clay, hard court. So he had now developed adaptability as part of his inner DNA. Finally, I said, well, where do you want to be in 20 years? He said, I became a CEO for the fun of the game, for the joy of learning. It's to keep the rally going. In the long run, his new story was the coach, the man who can only play on one court in a changing world, the man who could play on many courts, and finally, the person who sees the long term, who coaches the young. So as the world changes, it's not just using futures to map, disrupt, time, deepen the external world, it's also to understand the inner world. Now again, going back, as we wish to mitigate uncertainty, none of us know the future. So we use scenarios. A year and a half ago with my colleague Peter Black, the epidemiologist, we developed 4 scenarios for COVID-19. Scenario 1 was zombie apocalypse, how people felt, dread, they can't control, stress. We've seen this with the anti-vaxxer movement, people feeling they lost their freedoms throughout the Western world. Scenario 2 was the needed pause, a time for rest, for family, for connection, for community, to say we must slow down the plane, slow down the car, do something else. Scenario 3, we're seeing also the global health awakening, mRNA, what's called the COVID Moon Project, many scientists working together, going from GDP to well-being, the project we're doing with the government of New Zealand. Prosperity, planet, purpose, people. And scenario 4, if it keeps on mutating, what's called the Great Despair. More and more castle walls, nations fracturing, individuals fracturing. And we don't know the future, so we use scenarios to map and develop greater national policy. Work we've done with the Ministry of Education in Malaysia. What do we do as educational systems change, as students complain they're not being taught for jobs, as technology disrupts everything? Scenario 1 was called no change, bricks and mortar. Scenario 2 was marginal change, jukebox. Students have more say, what PRC wishes to do as well. Scenario 3 was more interesting, the Uberized university, education when you want it, where you want it, globally. Education comes to your living room. And scenario 4 was the end of the university, nano micro certification, a lifetime of multiple certificates, of multiple skills. As the world changes, it's not one job, 50 jobs in a lifetime, 50 careers. You're designing yourself for alternatives. The world externally is also changing, not just universities, educational systems, COVID-19. Research we're doing in many countries, we talk about the world today as members only, led by the invisible hand. Women are underpaid. It's endless crisis. World number 2, membership expands, and we're seeing in East Asia, visible hands. Market plus state plus community. But more interesting is the new club, the rise of peer-to-peer, what's called shared hands, partnership, the quadruple bottom line, prosperity, people, planet, purpose. And by 2070, 2080, work we're doing with the government of Abu Dhabi and others, we're talking about magical hands. Identity is becoming non-binary, a world of abundance. It's after the club. So try to see the future in stages, members only, expanding membership with World Economic Forum wants, creating something new, and designing something we can't even design after the club. So this leads to the final part of my presentation. It's about transforming. Futures, as I said earlier, it's forecasting to interpretation of the future, what it means, uncertainty, to third, critically asking who's missing, who's in the room, and finally transforming. Transforming is the vision. When I was working with the government of Singapore, my colleague Qiufan CHEN, he said before he would take his ministers around the world because seeing is believing. We know the Japanese did this during the Meiji Restoration. Collect evidence from around the world, best case studies, and implement. But what happens when you're number one? When Japan became number one in 1990, it didn't know what to do because it had no vision of the future. It had no vision of the future. So Qiufan CHEN says now, believing is seeing. Seeing is believing, to believing is seeing. The seeing comes from the visioning. Where do you wish to be? Where do you want to be in 2030? What is the vision? As Nelson Mandela says, the impossible becomes possible. As a simple example, we were working with disability futures. What is the vision for disability? Persons with disabilities says a world like the Paralympics, accessible. We redesign homes, schools, cities. We redesign everything. Third, the worldview, a culture of inclusion. And finally, the person who gave the best talk, she said she used to be known as the blind woman on the third floor. Julie, the blind woman. No, in her vision, she'll be known as Julie, not her ability or disability, but as her humanity. And finally, the project we've just finished with the government of New Zealand, we're developing an infrastructure vision for 2070 for the country. And you can see the visions about inclusion, about nature, about humans, about technology, and a new type of economy way beyond GDP. Once we've done that, though, we must make the future real. We talk about backcasting, work we did with the governors of Armenia. We had the 28 governors. We said if in 2030 we're a green Armenia, what did we do in 2029, 2024, 2023? So every step of the way, we have an event, a possibility, something we do. Retrofit buildings, green lighting, e-governance. So the critical part is linking with something far away with something that's possible. Otherwise, people in government won't vote for it because it's too far. We have to make the future feel real. So concluding, the key insights from this presentation is see the future as an asset, as a learning journey. The future is not there nor here. It's an asset, something you can trust. The future becomes your friend, not something scary. Challenge the used future. What's a practice that is not working? A practice that stops optimization. A practice that doesn't work, but you keep on doing it. Third, become the disruptor. Don't buy the used technology, create the novel technology. For given that none of us can know the future precisely, create alternative futures. And most significantly, as part of this alternative futures, become self-reflective. Find your own story. Find your own many futures. And make the vision real. The vision, we need the new vision, but the vision must be palpable. You can touch it. It can help you move from one side of the river to the other side of the river. Futures becomes the raft that takes us from one world to another world. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you found this useful.
Thank you, Professor Sohail. And thank you very much for your inspired and quite informative speech about future thinking and how to use it to make the transformation. As we know, Professor Sohail had made a great achievement in the field of philosophy, especially methodological research. For example, he once proposed a causal layered analysis to shape the future vision and also proposed the future triangle model. So thank you today's sharing as the wonderful thinking about the future. Now, I have questions for you, if it's okay.
Yes, I have time, if you have time.
Okay. As you mentioned in your lectures, a lot of interesting concepts just popped out, like future literature and metaphor transformation, and also matter future. Matter is very key words, as you know, in from last month globally and worldly. And we have a hot discussion about it, mentor universe. So I would like to know your thinking about what's the difference or the relationship between the two concepts, mental future and the mentor universe.
So our work is meta futures, and meta future, the idea is people live it literally, the superficial part. We want to go deeper to the system, to the worldview, and then to the metaphor. The narrative helps us change. So meta is the big picture looking from outside to in. It's like you're at a party, you're not on the floor, you're on the balcony looking at everything. So that's meta futures. Now the word meta as being metaverse, that's saying there's metaverse is artificial reality, artificial intelligence, the imagined reality in alternative spaces. So that's looking at the world through AI, through artificial construction. So I see them as very different topics. Meta is being used in two different ways. And if you can even play with it, there's also METTA, which is compassion for those who are suffering. So that's meta futures, help those in need. Meta, big picture. Meta, how do we create new virtual spaces? What's called the dream AI economy. All three are real, all three are important. It depends where you wish to play, where you wish to use your work. Clearly in designing, you need design tools to do design well. You need meta futures. But as a designer, you're going to be designing the metaverse.
Yes, I think so too. Okay, we got another question from the audience. It says how to use the futurism and into the concrete or specific discipline such as design. I guess it's a question from a student from design discipline.
No, I mean, I enjoy working with design people. The relationship is very strong. And so I would say keep on building it. In terms of design, the one thing I want to add is the future is structured, design is structured. Now, what we bring in is understand your own narrative. So the metaphor for people in the 1960s and 70s was, we're outside the planet, we're changing the planet, but we're not part of the planet. So you're designing a building for someone, but wait a second, you need to be in the building. So this is design futures research where we're part of the solution, part of the problem, we're not external. So this is again the self-reflective practitioner who's aware of her metaphor, aware of his story. So we enter mindfully, we enter with consciousness, and we're aware of what we can do wrong and what we can do right. So this becomes really important because it's not, when I work with development agencies, I did a workshop with 30 development agencies, Oxfam, Caritas, Red Cross, etc. They said the old metaphor is we do to you. We come in and we help the poor. The new metaphor is we do this together. So it's going from one way to partnership. So futures gives us methods and tools to engage in this meta dialogue. The other thing we add to it is not one future, but many futures. Not just in terms of many roads, but really deep different scenarios. And so this is very challenging to many people. They just say, please tell us the answer. We have so many clients who say, we don't want to take your 3-day course, just tell us the answer. And the challenge for us is, well, we don't know the answer for 2070 or 2090. We can work with you to map and design better, but we should not be in the position where we know better than you. So this is futures as a partnership.
Okay, thank you. We have extra time for the last questions. Here is, as you share with us that the metaphor thinking is very deep in in the structures of human thinking. So do you agree that if we want to change our society and future from the metaphor level, it's very difficult and it's very challenging, and it might will take a long time to accomplish the goal that we can make a new relative about our futures and society. Do you think so? And
so what I would say is, you can do it quickly and fail. You can do it deeply and succeed.
yeah.
So one country we were working with, we were looking at obesity, diabetes, early death. And we said, well, what's the cause? And they said, the metaphor causes we live to eat. So that's, yeah. Now, but there's also systemic. Systemic is we subsidize rice, fatty foods, oil. We make those cheaper. So now we need a new metaphor and a new strategy. The new metaphor was we eat for life. So then now if we eat for life, what's the government strategy? They said, well, we will no longer subsidize oil or rice or bread. We will subsidize plant-based food. We will subsidize fruit. We will subsidize home gardens. And finally, if it's metaphor without action, it's empty words. You have to have a new measurement. So when I work with nation states, they said right now our measurement is GDP. We can talk about a new future, but if we're still measuring GDP,
Make the further step.
We're measuring the past. So we say, let's measure the new future. So with many countries, we're talking about how do we measure well-being? So the measurement changes, the system of economic incentives changes, and the story changes. It's not either or, it's all three shift. Then there's a possibility of deep change. Otherwise, it's the used future. It's the wrapping around the box changes. It's the same box.
Okay, so the metaphor change might be the initial step we take to make a bigger progress. Okay, thank you.
And most CEOs and most prime ministers, they don't even know they have a metaphor.
Yeah.
So the first part is saying, okay, it's our strategy, but why is it your strategy? You go, aha, I have a hidden story. Change the story, change your future.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Hare.
My pleasure. Thanks so much. Great questions and great working you, Professor Zhang.
Okay, let's move on to the next part. In this part, we will have 4 panelist speakers who will share their insights on the future from different perspectives. The first panelist speaker Jennifer is a prolific author. Her books include The Future, a very short introduction, and post-formal education, a philosophy for complex futures, and the most recent work that is The Secret to Growing Brilliant Children Extra, which have become the master read for the future courses in universities around the world. Professor Jennifer Gidley, now please begin if you are ready. You can share your screen.
I'll share my screen.
Hi.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Zhang. I'm very happy to be here. I'm speaking to you from Australia, and I'm very grateful to be speaking to you at the Design Futures Conference. I'm just sharing my screen now. So here we go. Okay, so yes, so I'm going to be introducing you to some very big picture ideas on how we think and how we educate. And I'm going to be asking you to think about whether the old dominant ways of thinking and educating are suitable for the challenges of the 21st century. I don't believe they are. And so what I'm going to be sharing with you is why I think we need to radically change our way of thinking and our ways of educating so that we can meet the challenges of the 21st century. And that will involve introducing you to my post-formal education philosophy. So my talk will speak about the big picture in 3 parts. First of all, I'm going to introduce key 21st century challenges. Secondly, evolution of consciousness. And thirdly, the post-formal education for complex futures. So what are the key challenges of the 21st century? Growing inequality. How do we counter this? Climate emergency. How do we educate for regeneration? We're living in a post-truth world. How do we educate young people to discern? And we're exposed to exponential technology. How do we keep it human? Beginning with growing inequality. There's a huge wealth disparity in the world, and it's growing and growing. There's ongoing racial prejudice and still homelessness in spite of so-called increasing wealth. Here's Jeff Bezos, one of the world's richest men, and he's 165 million, but many of his Amazon Amazon staff are living on food stamps. We have the Apple, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, a huge collection of high-tech, the biggest high-tech companies, and their combined net worth exceeds $3 trillion US. Is Apple's largest office block on earth, worth $5 billion. Yet far away from Silicon Valley, we find still homelessness. We find the world's richest 1% in the Oxfam report of 2018. The world's richest 1% got 82% of the wealth generated in 2018. We found in the COVID year, the big COVID year 2019, the billionaires, most of them just got richer and richer, and ordinary people lost their homes, lost their lives. So what are the values underlying growing inequality? I believe we've forgotten how to value each other. We're dominated by greed and a lack of care for our fellow humans. So let's think about what kind of education could counter this inequality. The second big picture challenge, climate crisis. Melting glaciers, rising sea levels, inundated villages and cities. We have wildfires, superstorms, sea level rise beginning to hit home. Climate crisis leading us to the brink of ecosystem collapse. Over 3 billion people in coastal cities are at risk of rising sea levels. In just the first half of 2019, 7 million people were displaced through climate crisis. What values have caused this? I believe we've forgotten to value life, the environment, and our collective futures. So what kind of education can turn climate crisis around? The third challenge, we live in a post-truth world. How do we educate for discernment? How do we educate children to see through the media monopolies when these media monopolies are able to manipulate state and national elections? How do we educate for discernment when we live in echo chambers? Many children and young people spend social media echo chambers more than they spend with their families. And how do we educate for discernment to recognize fake news when our politicians, who are supposed to be society's leaders, are caught out lying, manipulating, and spinning the truth? What values are lacking in a post-truth world? Definitely there's a lack of discernment. There's a proliferation of information through the mass media, but young people don't know how to make sense of it. How can we educate to develop discernment? Fourthly, we live in a world of exponential technology. How do we keep it human for young people? Digital addiction is now common among young people. And we find with voicemail, chat rooms, talking toys and computers, the least valued of our evolutionary forces is the human voice. Without it, young people can't. There's research showing, I'm a psychologist and an educator. Research shows that children are entering kindergarten or the first year of school, and they can't speak. They can work screens, they can work mobile phones, but they can't speak because they're not exposed sufficiently to the human voice. It's a tragedy. We have in exponential technology today, Sohail mentioned the AI and singularity, the metaverse, if you like. The singularity, or so-called, is when our intelligence can potentially become trillions of times more powerful than it is today and increasingly non-biological. But there's a turnaround, there's an ethical turn in technology. Many tech-savvy researchers are now claiming that AI is not intelligent. There's so much hype and hubris. So I just got a message. My internet was unstable, but hopefully you're hearing me okay. So here's Kate Crawford, The Atlas of AI. She's the author of The Atlas of AI, a brilliant book. I recommend it to anybody. AI is neither artificial nor intelligent, says Kate Crawford. She believes that she's researched that basically AI is an extractive industry and it's using up all kinds of hidden resources, human, mineral, and so on, that nobody hears about. And then we have the brain-computer interface. So there's very big research dollars being spent on this. Elon Musk neural lace. It's an image, an artist image on the right. He claims it's a digital layer above the cortex. Of course, it's all just research at the moment, and much of this is science fiction. But in an age when human intelligence and computer processing may at some stage cohabit in unexpected ways, how do we keep it human for young people? How do we educate to keep humanity at the forefront? What is valued with exponential technology? Well, in Silicon Valley, there's definitely no question that there's the hyper-development of new technology is about greed. This is where the richest companies in the world reside. There's an undervaluing of human qualities. What kind of education can help to keep it human? So they were the challenges. Now I'm going to look at the big picture of evolution. How evolution of consciousness and the education evolution can help us to move beyond these challenges. Evolution of consciousness. There are two streams: cultural evolution, where we're looking at the emerging integral culture, and psychological development, or post-formal adult reasoning. Evolution of consciousness has been discussed by philosophers for at least 200 years, if not longer. In the 18th century, we had the German idealists, Goethe and Schelling. In the 19th century, though, the conversation, the discourse on evolution was hijacked by Darwin. So basically, Darwinian evolution was a purely biological notion, whereas the German idealists incorporated the whole human being, including the spiritual dimension. Then in the early 20th century, we had Rudolf Steiner in Europe and Sri Aurobindo in India, reinvigorating the conversation on evolution of consciousness as a holistic concept, an integral concept, which involved the whole human being and the nature and the cosmos. In the mid-20th century, we had Pierre Teilhard de Chardin and also Jean Gebs, a little more about in a minute. And then in the 20th to 21st century, adult developmental psychologists such as Jan Sinnott, transdisciplinary theorists such as Ervin Laszlo, and future researchers such as myself working on evolution of consciousness. Jean Gebser is a seminal cultural historian, was of the 20th century. His book, The Ever-Present Origin, is a wonderful read. He came up with the concept of 5 cultural, he called them structures of consciousness or mutations of consciousness over vast cultural periods. He spoke of archaic consciousness in the prehistorical period, magical consciousness in the Ice Age to the Agrarian Age, mythical consciousness from the Agrarian to the 800 or so BCE, when the transition to the mutation to mental rational consciousness took place at the leading edge of civilization through the development of philosophy, mathematics, language in a distilled way to alphabets, and so on. Then from the Renaissance, we see the emergence of integral consciousness. He's not the only person that spoke about this. Ken Wilber, Rudolf Steiner, and many others, Habermas, all spoke about a change, radical change in thinking from the 1500s and on into the future. This cultural consciousness will, integral cultural consciousness will continue. Now, the parallel stream of psychological development, we have Jean Piaget as a seminal figure. His Child's Construction of Reality is the book to read, and he spoke about 4 stages of cognitive development in children up to adulthood: sensory motor in the infant, pre-operational from 2 to 6, concrete operations from 7 to 12, and then what he called the highest stage of cognitive development was formal operations, which emerged between 12 and 18. And in Piaget's view, this was the highest stage of reasoning. He did suggest in some of his writings that there may be higher stages, that there may be reasoning to the nth degree, but he didn't develop this. It took a lot of adult developmental psychologists in the late 70s, particularly in the US, but more recently in Europe, Australia, and elsewhere, to propose a notion of post-formal reasoning. Now, a most important psychologist for this thinking was Jan Sinnott, is Jan Sinnott. She works at Towson University. She's a professor of psychology. Her book, The Development of Logic in Adulthood, Post-Formal Thought and Its Applications, was a very crucial book written in 1998, but still is relevant today. And Jan Sinnott and other developmental psychologists working with adults, highly intelligent, mature adults, proposed that post-formal reasoning was what adults, higher edge, if you like, leading edge, advanced adults are using post-formal reasoning or post-formal logics in their thinking. And these include qualities such as complexity, creativity, paradox, reflexivity, relativism, spirituality, and ultimately wisdom. So if we look at a parallel between the evolving cultural history and the psychological development of individuals, and take these 3 important figures, Gebser, Piaget, and Sinnott, we see great parallel between Gebser's 5 stages of cultural history and Piaget's 4 stages of cognitive development. But we need the adult developmental psychologists such as Sinnott to match up with Gebser's integral culture. And that's where post-formal operations comes in. In my PhD on evolution of consciousness, I worked with the research of numerous adult developmental psychologists who were working with post-formal reasoning. And there were a couple of dozen features, aspects, qualities that they had observed or found empirically or theoretically among higher functioning adults. And I distilled these down to 12 what I call post-formal reasoning qualities. You will get this PowerPoint, so we don't need to go through them all now individually. What I want to lead on to is that then when I looked in the second part of my PhD, where I was looking at why we need to evolve education, I found that out there exploring the innovative educational approaches in the world, the late 20th century into early 21st century, there are so many, there's a couple of dozen alternative, innovative educational approaches. And with a bit of grounded theory and mapping, I found that they actually map onto these post-formal reasoning qualities that are found by the adult developmental psychologists. So we'll talk more about these in a moment. So then what I did was I looked at these, I distilled those educational approaches down into a dozen approaches as well. And I found that they distilled into 4 core pedagogical qualities of love, life, wisdom, and voice. And now I'm going to talk about those. But the thing to know before we go into that is that in this current era, advanced individuals are in transition from the dominance of formal thinking or binary logic. And of course, binary logic is what's used in coding, and all computer logic is coding. Binary logic doesn't move to post-formal. So we're in transition from that to the emergence of more complex, creative, integrated, post-formal logics. And we definitely need to educate young people for this transition. So now my third and final part of this presentation is looking at these qualities. So what is pedagogical love? Well, I could say a lot about this, but I'm distilling it here to contemplative love and critical reverence. We find this in educational approaches that include reverence, care, integrating head and heart. There are a range of such educational approaches: spiritual, transformative, contemplative, social and emotional education, integrative and holistic education. And I believe these educational approaches that foster pedagogical love help to deal with growing inequality. Spiritual, social and emotional and holistic education develop compassion, and this is how we will turn around growing inequality. Secondly, pedagogical life. It is about revitalizing education through imaginative, organic thinking. And this is about educational approaches that revitalize education. So imaginative education, ecological, environmental, sustainable education, futures and foresight education. When you take a long-term view, such as with futures and foresight education, you have to consider life and the future of life and sustainability. So I believe this approach, pedagogical life, is what will help us turn around climate emergency. These pedagogies of life, imagination, and ecological and futures education, they foster ecological sensibility, and they are the approaches that will help us turn around climate crisis. Next, pedagogical wisdom. This is about waking up to multiplicity, multimodal approaches. We need to educate for multimodal and layered approaches, creativity in education, complexity in education, and wisdom education itself. These are the approaches that will help to educate for a discernment in a post-truth world. So the pedagogies of wisdom are multimodal, creative, complex, and these will help to develop discernment in young people, which is vital in a post-truth world. Finally, pedagogical voice. What is it? It's complex. It's about finding your voice. It's the language of self-awareness, awareness of your own language. And how do we do this? Through multivocal approaches. And these educational approaches nurture empowerment. And there's a lot of them. There are a lot of little niche educational approaches. There's postmodern and post-structuralist, aesthetic, artistic, poetic education, critical, post-colonial, global, and planetary education. There's 9 of them there. And they're all being developed by clusters of individuals around the world. They have journals, they have books, they have conferences, multiple approaches, and all of these multivocal approaches, I believe, nurture empowerment. And this is how we keep it human. With the rise of exponential technology, these pedagogies of voice, postmodern, aesthetic, planetary, critical, and lots of human voice. Children, young people need to be speaking, to be spoken to have conversation. What's wrong with that? that all fosters empowerment. So in summary, we've looked at the key 21st century challenges: growing inequality, climate crisis, a post-truth world, and exponential technology. Sounds overwhelming. But if we consider that we're in an era where evolution of culture and consciousness are occurring, we are moving into a integral cultural era. We are developing as adults post-formal reasoning qualities if we're conscious and we're working on ourselves. And then if we distill this into an educational approach, a post-formal education philosophy, and we design our systems around this through love, life, wisdom, and voice, we are able to design a future that will be able to meet the global challenges of the 21st century, the complexity and the volatility of the 21st century. So finally, if you want to read any more about my work, which I've only just had to touch on the merest tiny bits of, my book, Post-Formal Education, is the expanded version of this talk. My book, The Future, A Very Short Introduction, is coming out soon in Chinese and Italian and Greek. It's out in Arabic and Turkish already. And my book, The Secret to Growing Brilliant Children, which is about my work with Steiner education and contemporizing it for the 21st century. It's a 100-year-old process, but it needs to be contemporized. So, thank you very much. A pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you, Professor Gidley. Thank you for your very logical structures and clear problematic with your whole speech. And Professor Gidley just show us if we want to meet the challenges of the complex futures, what we need to do from the perspective of future education. Now we have an extra times and for small questions for you, if okay, Professor Gidley.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Here's the questions, which I believe is also a key idea to understand your whole future educational philosophy, that is the post-formal. I guess is the keywords of your whole research. So why do you use the term post-formal for your educational philosophy?
Okay, thank you, Professor Zhang. Well, because the mainstream education, that's the common education today, which I also sometimes call the factory model of education, it grew out of the industrial era. It was designed for an industrial era time, and it's formal education. And it educates for formal thinking, for binary logic, for the way to think in either or. So when we have a problem and we have, if somebody presents two conflicting ideas or two contrasting ideas, in this world of formal thinking, if one of them is right, the other one must be wrong. But this is not post-formal logics. So in post-formal logics, where you have complex thinking and paradoxical thinking, you can have multiple perspectives that are all correct about the same issue or same problem. So that's post-formal reasoning. And I wanted to make it very clear that my education philosophy, in my education philosophy, we need to embrace this post-formal reasoning. We need to move beyond binary logic. We need to move beyond this, you know, if I'm right, you must be wrong, or us and them, which is very divisive. We need an education system which is inclusive and which is multi-perspectival. So that's why I've used the term post-formal.
So the post-formal, the post is very similar to beyond or modern, or just like modernism versus postmodernism. Can I understand the post-formal through the way?
Yes, you could include, I mean, postmodern and post-structuralist, and there's a lot of posts around. So yeah. A lot of posts, and even post-post, people talk about post-post. But for me, the use of post-formal is particularly related to the psychology the use of
Psychology,
post-formal
okay.
reasoning in psychology. So that's the key to it.
Because
And
it's
I
unique
wanted
context.
to make that that psychology aspect, that we are moving psychologically to new types of thinking. I wanted that to be sort of paramount in my philosophy.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Jennifer Gidley. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now let's welcome our second panelist speaker, Professor Yao Zhijie, who comes from the China Academy of Art. She is an international design curator, design critic. Professor Yao wrote a paper about design future in Chinese, probably the first one in Chinese to reach the emerging field. And today, Professor Yao will bring us a very interesting notion that is mental design. Let's welcome Professor Yao. Hello， 白老师好。您的声音是不是没有打开？
Professor Yao, you seem to be muted.
我这边听不见，不知道
We can't hear you.
会务组的同志们能不能听见？
我们也听不到，我们也听不到。
We can't hear.
OK， 没关系，姚老师您再试试看一下那个画面右下。
Professor Yao, can you hear?
OK 了，
不用 speaker 了 ，OK，
好了。
好，
OK
那我们就不用耳机了。
So I will not going to use my earphone. I'm going to share my screen.
Can 可以看到吗？
可以，
Can you see my screen?
啊，对，我在弄，我在弄。
好，
Can you go full screen? Yes. Can you see it? Yes.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for Professor Fu's invitation. And I would be like to join this discussion and this afternoon. And what I'm going to talking about is meta design and sustainable city regeneration. First of all, we have been thinking about design and design futures almost 10 years. And 10 years ago, I joined the Goldsmiths Design Futures courses with my tutor, John Wood. And we have been talking about what is design futures. So there is a question we are facing now. Is it the future of design or the designing the future? What is the real concept of design futures we need to face? Hold on, I cannot read the screen. Okay. And now we are facing some issues, the global issues. We are always talking about the climate issues, the global warming, the low carbon cost. And now we are facing the COVID-19 problems. And that is the common issues the whole globe is facing. And there will be water and food fight everywhere, we say maybe in the future. And we must green the world. 100 mega cities, which are responsible for 60 to 70% of global emissions. And isn't it the job of the politicians? Because we have always saying, okay, that's the job of the politicians, that's the government's job. But we need to think about the main government method are too abstract and indirect to be effective. Could designers help by working in the more directive to change habits and lifestyles? Design giving is very limited in this power. So we need to rethink about design. For instance, economic systems need redesigning to harness a diversity of synergies. And we always think maybe we can do more sustainable design or do more green design or to make it better. So designing greener products and services may not be enough to avert an environmental calamity in the 21st century. And eco-design cannot change the paradigm. So paradigm, that's one of the keywords we're thinking about. Are we running out of resources? Actually, not really. We are running short of imagination. We can't solve problems with the type of thinking we used to create them. Einstein told us a long time ago. So use our imagination. And it raised the requirement for design now. We need to rethink about design. What is the task of design and what is the definition of design nowadays? Let's look back. There are 4 stages of design in the history. Stage 1 is from no design to be recognized as a sort of decoration. That is the first stage. And then the existence of design as a style, and then design as a process, which can participate in the process of social development and enterprise development. That is stage now we're using more in the stage 3. And the stage 4 is design as a strategy, as important motivation for guiding and planning. And we hope in the future, design can have that task. And we need to rethink what is design about. We need to rethink what is design for. As a part of the answer, we think design is kind of attitude, and this attitude will lead us to more activism. And design is solving complex problems than just do individual form design. Design is about from tangible to intangible. It's focused more on system than the individual form making. Design is about system making, which will make synergy and the recombination. So as we know, design used to be looked as production, making things. And now design is for reproduction by using the old resources. And what is in the future? We think in the future, design is more focused on recombination. We need to think in a relational way. And we used to think about design as a product. When we think of production, we think of extraction. That is always design do. It by using resource, by using materials to making things, the tangible things. But now we need to think about beyond that. How can we design beyond this idea by looking at the intangible things, by looking at the software, by looking at the system, to help the social society better, make it better. So we need more join up ways to feed, to clothe, to shelter, to organize and learn. Here I have listed most of the design disciplines, and most of them have been running individually by themselves and try to help the society development. But now what we need to think is how can we redesign the paradigm and to organize all those disciplines together as a system is a join up way to help the society. And as we know, many designers already manage complex issues because now the issues we are facing, not individual or linear issues anymore, which connect to each other all the time. So we need to think about the regulating value, and we need to think about the regulating awareness, we need to think about the regulating flow, and we need to think about the regulating integration. So what we need is join up way. Here, we start talking about meta design. Meta design, as we think, is an emerging conceptual framework. It helps designers to invention and global ecological society. And we think there were 8 key aspects of meta design as a methodology we can use to design things, to look at things, to think about the world. The first of all is game changing, and then comprehensive, and then languaging, and then synergy weaving, co-creation, network, consciousness, eco-mimetic, and a radical optimistic. And first of all is game changing. And designers are seldom, we're always talking about use design, like to build a vocabulary. But what now we need to do is changing the grammar by using design. So the task of design is not anymore to make new stuff individually like a vocabulary, but to join things up together by using grammar. So changing the grammar is one task of design. So designers are seldom paid to rethink whole system. And secondly, comprehensive. Addressing the root causes of our situation requires the design of whole join-up system. And understanding more about whole system creates new opportunities. Like for students, should students learn to identify their skills and find compatible team players? That is always happen when we're teaching students in college and university and like design thinking and team working way. So that is one example. And thirdly, languaging. How can designers encourage a beneficial change with their societies, create new language or using comprehensive language? So here, language, which means more than language, talking language. It's a kind of metaphor as well. And the language can expand the human world. We need to find common purposes that regulate actions, ideas, and stuff. Actions often become habits after our culture validate them with words. Like Ralph Lampkin changed a behavioral paradigm by designing the word genocide. And Polly Higgins is trying to change the paradigm by designing a test in the word ecocide. So that is the example for language changing and use the join up way and the synergy way. And fourthly, it's synergy weaving. We only get abundance by combining things. This synergy enables designers to get more from less. And how can we create a global synergy of synergies? And like Fuller said, the behavior of whole systems unpredicted by the behavior of their parts taken separately. And when we join them together, it will be more than 1 + 1. So that is the value of synergy. And the synergy of materials that synergize with form. And number 5, co-creative. Wisdom, the emergent and the distribute. Therefore, the era of individual genius is over. Like the author's idea of bisociation can create new stuff. Bisociation is like sexual reproduction, but when 1 + 1 have a new baby, it will be beyond the 1 + 1. It will be number 3. And number 6, network consciousness. Ensuring effective communication across the whole system is important. And design is a rational task. This is an example which is called walking bus. And by connecting things together to make a system, we solve a journey problem, like less air pollution from car, walking is good exercises, children learn to socialize, reduce food consumed. And this walking bus, which is a project, and ask the children go back home, hand in hand, walking back home like a team. And instead of the school bus take them back home. So that is the project, and which is very famous service design examples. And it's very simple action, but this action can solve a joint problems here, as we can see. So that is the system, and we can use this system to redesign the social system. And number 7, ecomimetic. We build a world based on the division of labor. We always expect economics of scale. But we need to remember diversity is the opportunities bank for survival. So how can we encourage the diversity? And diversity and adaptability sustain ecosystems. Adaptability is the eco-purpose of creativity. And number 8, radically optimistic. A high level of team consciousness needs an affirmative and memorially supportive approach. Okay, so here is the 8 points we're always thinking about in meta design and use it as a method for the design system. And now when we use this idea for city regeneration, we think narrative environments is a very good way to it's a very effective method that can combine the previous 8 aspects of meta design and use it for the city regeneration. And the narrative is a more useful term than identity. Narrative is a key tool for researching and communicating the unique quality of cities. And a multidisciplines team of experts can build a city narratives as macro and macro narratives. The macro narratives can be generated by users. Design practice is an essential part of team because designers are very observant and sensitive to the unique liquid of cities and experience they offer. And design thinking can turn problem into asset. Actually, narrative environment is a kind of design method we use for the spatial design and city regeneration. The key point for narrative is by looking at and doing research of this place, and we find out a story, and we use a multi-disciplines to tell the story like languages. So it is a practical way to use meta design in city regeneration project. And we transform difficult and unloved space into loved space. That is examples for narrative environments project we have been done since last 10 years. And for example, this project, and we redesigned a small square in Italy by using the sun umbrella from the beach to rebuild the environment, like people can take holiday in the beach. So that is the installations telling the vacation story and take it to the people who cannot leave the city. And we use the similar method to do the placemaking, which is happened in Shanghai. That is the fan of Tongji University. This project finished in 2013. And we always know the college and the university inside of the campus is a different world compared to the outside of the campus. And the people always curious about the university and the college's life. So this wall tried to tell the story between the students, the teachers inside of the campus, and we outside the world, the people, the passing by people. So we use glasses as a reflection, and we use TV monitors, tell the story and reflect the real world outside and inside. And the people is quite curious about these installations, and they look at the monitors and they're trying to understand the story about the school and also about themselves. So that is the narrative way we are using to tell the story for everybody. And this is a story-led placemaking installation again, which happened in King's Cross train station of London during the London Olympic Games time. And at that time, this installation board attracted a lot of participations to play the game because it's very simple installations with balls, and which has two sides, yellow side and the black side. You can roll the ball and by using the color to make the pattern you want. And you also can update the patterns you want on the website beforehand, and then you can meet people there, maybe strangers. You can meet people there to make the story you would like to tell. So it is quite simple installations, but it's the join up way. It using the physical and the intangible elements together to make people tell their story. Which make the city story more individual, more joinable, and involve people into the space. So we collect the stories, we create stories, and we tell stories. That is the key point for narrative environment. And we design experience for retail, leisure, heritage exhibitions, and community spaces. We do urban branding strategies and forecasting, etc., etc. And that is the whole structure of this idea we are doing now. The final purpose is destination making, and by using story and to have the place more meaningful, more readable, and more joinable. And we think this is a very useful method for city regeneration. And get back to the meta design idea. In this method, we're trying to use comprehensive language and to involve people, and then also tell the story of this place culture, and also have the forecasting purpose. The design of narrative environments employs a scalable methodology that can be used to transform a room, a building, a public space, or whole cities. when we're talking about city, we always think, okay, that is the city branding, that is the landmark of the city, statues of the city, and the main view of the city, and also the people's living way of the city. But as we see, all these plays a part in placemaking. And how can we put all those together to tell the whole story? Narrative methodology. And let me introduce it a little bit. We work in teams with mixed experts. So that is the idea from meta design as well. We join people together from different disciplines and look at the context, history, and environment as context, and focus on culture and the social practice and physical environment through the site and the social research, and develop an overall strategy as a macro narrative, but also develop tangible designs at macro narratives, and target specific audiences, prototype, and test the concept. Focuses on unique asset, not just the problems. Okay, here is the last example I would like to share. And it's the project we did for Palermo. And we know that is a city of Sicily. And it's quite famous with the mafia films. And when people are talking about this place, they always think about risk and take a risk and how to challenge themselves. So we designed an app as a journal app. People can upload the tasks you have challenged yourself when you go through the city, and you can upload the food you have never tried and now you try this food, or you climb the tree even, and just upload all the interesting things you have been trying in this city as a task. And people can follow the steps you're trying and go through the city. It's a very interesting, like a journal. People can go to this city and follow your journal and try to explore this city as a very interesting storytelling places. So that is the software things we are doing to tell the story of the city and try to regenerate the city culture. So here is the answer. And Design Futures is designing the future by using the future design thinking and method, and help meta design will be one of those. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yao. Thank you, Professor Yao, for providing us about an ontological thinking on design. And since the time is up, so let's just welcome the next speakers of the panelists. That is a very famous scholar who is also very familiar to our Chinese audience. That is Ezio Manzini. Ezio Manzini, Professor Ezio Manzini is the chairman of DESIS Network and professor at Politecnico di Milano, and who is the world leading expert on sustainable design, and his interest is social innovation. Now, let's welcome Professor Ezio's presentation. You may share the screen, yeah. 好像听不到声音哦。
It seems that we cannot hear you,
So
Professor.
in a way to discuss about design future, we have, first of all, to discuss about this future per se, because we have so many risks in this moment around us. So what I want to talk with you is a little bit about what we learn, and especially for what regard myself, what I learned from social innovation experiences that can bring us to think what I think should be. This means a design future that is not only for the humans, but it's more than humans. It's for the human and for the planet. And I call it designing for the web of life. I like to start with this picture. It's not so new. It is 3 years ago now, but it could be also today very much. What we see outside from the window, we see that the world is burning. Everything around this place is burning. But the people inside are relatively quietly, in a relatively normal condition, discussing about what to do. And this is good, this is strong, this image, to give you the sense of urgency that I feel. I feel that we cannot be so quiet. I think that we have to really change the business as usual way of doing things and try to create something new to face the condition in which we are. In other words, the question is what we do once we found out that our house, let's say our planet, is in fire. I'm working on design and sustainability since several decades. And in the past, the way to talk about the thing, if you saw the rhetoric that was used, it was if we don't do something now, we risk something very grave in the future. We risk future catastrophes. Now the metaphor has to change. The way we tell the story has to be changed, because we have to say we still have to do something to have a better future, but at the same time we have also to try to understand what to do now to avoid or to reduce the impact of the catastrophes that are already around us. Therefore, for me, in a discussion, in a conference like this one, the issue about if or not, whether or not to take in account the ecological emergency is not longer a design choice. Because for me, a design choice is when you have a choice. If you don't have a choice, it's not a design choice. Therefore, to be convinced that we have to do something to face the environmental, ecological disaster in which we are, is not a design choice. It's a forced one. The design choice for me is to choose in which direction, because it's obvious, it's such a new thing, it's such a new condition that there are several different ideas of what to do. So the real issue for me, and also the real issue when we talk about future of design, is to choose the right direction. Of course, we can have different opinions, and I will express mainly my one, but I will try to start presenting two main opinions. And for designers, it's very good to work using what is called generative metaphors. That means images that are strong enough to make clear what could be a certain condition, and at the same time give a guideline on what to do and how to transform these metaphors in practical activities. In the Western tradition, at least, maybe the Chinese tradition is different, but in the Western tradition, especially in the design culture environment, many years ago, Buckminster Fuller in the 60s was recognizing that we was living in a limited planet. So it accepted the limit of the planet. But at the moment, frankly speaking, nobody was talking about the limits of the planet. We was working as the possibility to grow was without any limits forever. So Buckminster Fuller said, no, the planet is limited. And we have to imagine it as a spaceship, the Earth altogether as a big machine where we are at the same time the pilots and the the one that use it. And this has been a very strong metaphor and is still in between us. Some years ago, 15 years ago, more or less, another person, James Lovelock, came up with the idea that the Earth has to be seen as a living entity, as an all living entity. At the time, it was called the Gaia hypothesis. This idea to see the Earth as one living entity. And also this idea, keeping account that the planet is limited, and in this planet there is a huge ecosystem that is to be considered as a living entity, and it's not a machine, it's a living entity. And here we have the contrast in between the two visions. One vision is to consider the planet as a big machine, and the other one is to consider the planet as a living entity. And these two visions that of course clashes one with the other ones have several important implications for design. For instance, to be very short, but I hope to give an idea. The spaceship Earth, so the idea of our planet as a machine, goes on with what, at least in the Western culture, has been the mainstream. As we can say, it's a mechanistic mainstream. So to look to reality as a machine. It is anthropocentric. That means we, the human being, are the drivers. We can decide where to go, and we have to go where we want to go as a human being. And it's basically technocratic, because if it is a machine, there are also the pilots, and the pilots are the ones that know where to go, and they are the technician in charge to decide where to go. And the machine, as all the machine, if there are some problem, can be repaired. And as every machine, it can be upgraded and improved depending on our capability and will. And this is the anthropocentric side. So we as human beings can repair the problem that we create. At the same time, we can improve the capability of this planet to sustain so many people. The other one, considering the Earth as a living entity, is totally diverse and require, at least for the Western culture, or for the culture of modernity. By the way, the culture of modernity is the one that shaped the design culture. So in some way, if I say modernity, I say the Western culture, but it's also the culture of design that probably you are discussing, even though you are in China. It's a totally different, because it accepts what now we see as obvious, that the reality is super complex. So we accept the complexity of the world and we try to navigate in it. And this complexity can be seen as a living organism. And when you accept complexity, you have also to recognize that we, the human being, have no particular position in this mesh of networks, but we are simply nodes in a larger network that is the network of life, the network of everything, living and not living, human and not human, are composing the larger entity that is our planet. So it's also a non-anthropocentric attitude that recognizes the radical interconnection in between everything, human and not human, living and not living. And when we said, okay, and so what we can do if we are not at the center of the system, but we are only one part, what we can do, it asks us to move from the productivist attitude, the think we can produce what we want. So we want to do something and we can do exactly what we want, and to move toward what is called a regenerative approach. That means we can, of course, we have our action have an impact on the reality, and this is visible. But what is this result is not depending only from us, it depends from us, and it depends from the interaction that there is in between us and the overall complexity of the system. So nobody can really design the results of what happens. We can only intervene in generating something that afterward will generate the final result. And this could be, and it is a philosophical discussion, but it's also a discussion about two very different design culture. And I would say this design culture is not only the cultures of the designers, but is the culture of the choices that's behind the political choices that are taken when we discuss about the environment. So we can find now this kind of clash in between the two visions at every level of human life, from considering, as I said, what does it mean to intervene now to try to solve some ecological problems if we can use our planet as a machine that has to be repaired, or if we have to have a metaphor of healing. And also, as I said before, what is the difference in between the idea of producing and the idea of engendering? That is making things happen that in turn generate something. And for me, and for the kind of discussion that we have had with the network that I participate, it is a DESIS network, it took the position of another philosopher that is quite important for us, that is Bruno Latour, that is talking about the necessity to escape from the polarization in between the global and the local. And he introduced this idea of the terrestrial. That means whoever are inhabitants of the planet. And in a lecture that he gave some years ago, he presented this kind of polarization. So telling the story about how in the discussion, in the philosophical discussion, but also in the political discussion, but also we can say in the discussion in between us designers, there has been a discussion in between focusing on the global and how to create global thinking and global interventions, or to focalize on the local with all the implication. And he proposed, and I find that it's a very correct proposal, to move from this contrast in between the local and the global toward looking to another direction. That is exactly what they call the terrestrial. It means this capability to recognize that we are all part of this living planet, and therefore not to stick on this contrast between local and global, but to move toward the terrestrial that could be the new attractor for a new civilization. So attractor means an idea that is capable to attract many different other people doing things, acting in the reality, and in our case, developing projects. So the question is if this idea of considering ourselves as terrestrial, so as inhabitant of this network of life, of interlinked components, could be helpful in imagining what to do. And if this idea of the terrestrial give us the direction where to go. And for me, the kind of design culture that I'm proposing is based on some hypothesis that moves from this background. The first hypothesis is that being terrestrial, as Latour is proposing, means to fully recognize complexity. So to recognize that we live in a complex world and that we have to learn how to navigate in this complexity. And that whatever we do is done from inside this complexity. This means that nobody really can guide the overall system. What we can do is only to have an impact on some part of the system that generate in turn something else. And the second hypothesis for me is that there are what we call social innovations around us that are the seed of a new culture of complexity. So when we talk about what could be a design culture for a terrestrial approach, we have not to start from zero. And we have not only to start from some traditions that could be very helpful, but we can also start looking around us and looking and recognizing if around us there are some people that are already moving in this direction. And for this reason, what we call social innovation can be seen as prototype of what could be terrestrial way of being and doing. So social innovation, now I have no time to discuss so much about social innovation. I give only some very short idea. The social innovation I'm talking about is something that started worldwide, more or less at the beginning of this century. And we can see people that are doing something that was not considered obvious before. So are people that choose to live and to live nearby different families sharing, for instance, something, this co-housing or the collaborative hub. We see a new kind of services that put together also the capability of people to help each other, and they generate what is called a community welfare. We see a new idea of food that creates new relationship in between the people and what they eat, considering the 0 mile kilometers, considering the organic food, generating new relationship between people and citizens and farmers. We have seen a new way of producing that could be done at the very local scale, that is brought by the maker movement, by the Fab Lab movement, that at least with all the limits, but show that there is not only one way of considering the way in which we produce, not only the big factories, but also something that can be distributed in between the people. And we could continue with hundreds of ideas like this. And we have discussed it for 2 decades on how much these different ideas could be problem solver. So they were in some way designed solution that could solve some problems that otherwise could be very difficult. But at the same time, we can also consider them as sense makers. So something that can permit to generate new meaning and therefore to generate a new culture that we need. And they are sense maker because if we look inside them, the way in which they work, not only they get some interesting result, but also they break the dominant individualistic and competitive behavior of the modernity. And also they change the role in the actors. So in some way they change the system. And doing that, in my view, they anticipate some terrestrial way of living. So the culture of the terrestrial, the new culture that I think should emerge, has already some prototype around us that we have to see and to recognize them. And recognizing them, we can also recognize some guidelines that we can learn from them. And these are guidelines for a design that could be terrestrial and non-anthropocentric. I focus here on 3 main guidelines that we can observe in these initiatives, and I will very quickly present them to you to conclude my lecture. And the fact that we normally say that we design something to produce something else, and we should shift from this way to present our role, say we are designing something to engender result. Engender result means that what we design cannot really be produced, cannot be the final result, because the final result is, as I said before, a result of a quantity of different interactions. To be less abstract, let me give you an example from one case. If we consider a service like this, it's a service for elderly people. And the service for elderly people, as you see in this case, in this image, is to have good relationships, but relationships cannot be designed. So here is a typical case of recognizing the complexity of the relationships in between human beings. We cannot design directly a condition like this because this is the result of the interaction, the free interaction in between people. But what we can do, we can generate some conditions that make this kind of possibility of nice interaction possible and maybe probable. And here I gave one example that is a circle of care. What you see on the top on the right are some initiatives that can happen, but to have this initiative happening, you need to have the enabling system. So there is a system of a place, of programs, of competencies and skills of people that are capable to generate condition that makes what is the microservices that we see on the top right can happen. And so what we do is to design for enabling and not to design for final result. The second one is reframing the system. Reframing the system is that the main trend has been to generate, in the name of efficiency, a certain idea of efficiency has been generated very vertical, hierarchical system where it's interesting to reframe the system to generate systems that are more horizontal and distributed. And to create this more distributed system, generate the condition to have new kind of relationship in between the systems and the communities around them. And this is another example. This is a platform in Milano that was conceived to support the possibility of people to choose in between different social services. So it's related to social services. But the idea has been that this digital platform would not be only a digital platform, but to have some places that had to be distributed in all the different neighborhoods that we can find in Milano. So the first move has been to distribute the service in the different neighborhoods. But this is not enough because these services has been used not only to deliver the service, but to help the creation of communities around the topic of care in this case. So we have the distribution of the service and the community building of care. And what is even more interesting is that these offices and the possibility to generate care has not been put in an environment like this one, but it has been mainly put in other places. As for instance, this example is in a bar. So we could have a bar, or we can have a social center, or we can have a museum, or we can have whatever else that is a place that is already living for some function and there's some relationship with people. That became a hybrid multifunctional space in which you have also the social service. That is one of the activities that is done in this place. With the generation of these hybrid services, hybrid places that could generate economy of space or scope. And to do all this is necessary to reframe the system, to imagine the system in a different way. And finally, and most importantly, we have to see the importance of the notion of care. The notion of care is quite well known as a notion. It's very discussed now, but we have to understand how much this notion of care is important if we want really to heal our planet and to reweave the web of life. Because it has to be a care that is not only the care of people, that by the way is not only, but it's very important, the care of people, because our modern society tended to become a careless society without care. So to introduce care in the relationship in between people is very, very important. At the same time, the people has to be rooted in a place and have care for the place in which they live. So it's a care toward the environment in which the people is living. And it's a care about what is needed for us to live. That could be for the energy that we consume, for the food that we eat, for the greenery in which we live and generate our air, for the water that is to be sustained. And in general, caring for all the, what is called the voiceless entities. So for all the entities that are so important in the ecosystem, but do not have voice. So they have to find somebody that to talk for them. And this is the very interesting story of the citizen science and the possibility that they have to voice in name of river, of plants, of animal that do not have voices. So design for caring is a care for the people, but also care for the other entities. So the more than human care, we can say in extended care. And in my view, and this is the conclusion, these different guidelines are not enough, are not all the story, but could be three main pillars to build a future of design future. And at the same time, a design future that could be capable to reweave the wave of life. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Ezio Manzini. Are you online right now? Hi, Professor Ezio Manzini. Hi. Very glad to see you.
Yes, for me too.
Hi. Not too long ago, you just published a book, which is also the first book of my executive editor of the Design and Time series, just this one in my hands. Have you ever seen this? Yeah. So I want to thank you personally for your intellectual contribution. And I also want to thank you for sharing your inspired thoughts on social innovation design. I know you just gave us an online course last month by CAFA in Beijing. Yeah, we all watched that course. That's very brilliant. And so here is the question from the online audience, that is, can you tell us more about the difference among the three different concepts, like the web of life and the system or ecology?
The web of life and what?
The web of life and the system and the ecology. What's the difference between the three concepts?
Well, I'm not sure that I understand ecology and web of life. I've not the system.
Well, I mean, the system consists by human and non-human, just a modern human future.
Well, in some way they are converging notions. So practically, in some way, they say the same thing. It's only a different way of looking at them. So the ecology is, as you know, is a science that considers how different living systems go together and survive. And to talk about ecology and ecological thinking is by definition a very complex way of looking to things. Afterward, if you want to represent this ecology, you can move toward the systemic way of discussing, and you can represent ecology as a very complex system in which there are several subsystems that interact, sometimes collaborate, sometimes clash, and sometimes they are in competition, sometimes they are in collaboration. So it's a different way to tell the same story. And to talk about the web of life, if you want, it's a more poetical way of telling the story. So to say that what we call life at the end is nothing else than that complex system that I was talking before. So sometimes it could be better for the sake of the language, what you are telling, to use one or the other ones, but basically they are the same meaning. And altogether, for me, is what I call the deep recognition of complexity, of the complexity of the world. And here probably there is also, could be a very interesting conversation in between, for instance, in this case, the Western ideas and the Chinese one, because beyond what is modern China now, that maybe think, of course, as different, but the tradition of China is based on a much more holistic way of considering the world, where one of the strengths of the Western way of thinking has been for a period to separate, to say, okay, there are the human and there is the nature, there are the different elements that are separated. And this now we see that is very problematic. And we, the Western, have in some way to reflect, moving from what is our background, but arriving to propose something that is this more integrated, ecological way of thinking. I listened before Jennifer talking about education and how we should change our way of thinking and our way of educating, discovering, recognizing the complexity. And for what I understand, what she said was really very convergent to what has been my proposal, at least by the point of view of recognizing this complexity that cannot be reduced. So the world is not a machine. So this is the main point. So we cannot treat our planet, ourselves, the other entities that are part of the living network as a machine. We are a living entity, and everything is become different if you think in this way.
Thank you, Ezio. Your speech recalled me of we can rethink the value of our traditional. I remember that Latour wrote a book named "We Have Never Been Modern," in which it recommend the idea of holistic you just mentioned in ancient China. That's a very big value that we can rethink about it more. Thank you, Ezio.
Thank you.
Okay. Right now, here is our last panelist speaker, Mr. Chen Qiufan, who is a science fiction writer, screenwriter, translator, and curator. He has won many awards on science fiction, and his work have been widely translated into more than 20 languages, ranking first in many European and American science fiction magazines. And he has many representative works like The Waste Tide, The Algorithm for Life, and AI 2041, and so on. And today, he will share us with his thinking about how to design the future with science fiction. Let's welcome Mr. Chen Qiufan.
All right. Thank you for having me to ICDF Future Philosophy. So right now I'm gonna share my screen. So happy to hear like what Professor Manzini mentioned, like the Gaia from James Lovelock and non-anthropocentric design, etc., and also complexity. Those are all domains I'm very interested in and recently doing a lot of research. But today I'm gonna talk a little bit about AI and science fiction and how we use the format as a literature and art to design our future. So let's start from this very popular concept of AI, artificial intelligence. So what we are really imagining when we people talking about AI. Let's take a look into the timeline of AI in both real world and science fiction world. So right now, as everybody might know, from the Dartmouth Summer Research Conference in 1956 to AlphaGo beat the human champion in 2017. So we already experienced like a couple of times of ups and downs on AI in the industry. Meanwhile, we also found that there's so many interesting entanglement between the science and the science fiction. For example, Isaac Asimov actually bring out this kind of robot series from iRobot to Iron Cave since the 1930s. So it was the golden age of science fiction in America. So bring up this pretty interesting idea of how human beings coexist with robots, another form of artificial intelligence. Later on, in 1968, Arthur C. Clarke, a very famous science fiction author of 2001 Space Odyssey, together with the famous director Stanley Kubrick, represent the movie and become a historical blockbuster and all-time classic. So in the movie, actually, one of the very important character, it was AI, HAL 9000, who was intended to murder one of the astronauts. And of course, in China, after the 1978, Mr. Ye Yonglie, with his very futuristic and utopian novel 小灵通漫游未来 actually become the best seller back in the days. Also imagine a future society where robots can be a servant in each families, and we are all driving, flying autonomous vehicle up in the air, etc., etc. So I think AI right now as a term is not only been limited in the domain of science and technology, but also become a popular culture. It's creating a lot of buzz, misunderstanding, and also imagination towards our future. So we can also feel that like in all these images of AI and robots in a science fiction movie, like from Transformer, Terminator, artificial intelligence, humans, and her, we can perceive this kind of very cliche, hostile, competitive, bleak of all this kind of like AI as a grand others. So a lot of people might always ask me, will they enslaving the mankind in the future? So is that what we want from science fiction? That's always something make me thinking, because right now we are confront a lot of challenges in the real world. If we are not able to imagine a more positive, brighter future with the help of AI as a very powerful tool, so what's the point of writing this kind of stories? Or maybe we can create something differently from all these negative portraits from the past. So that's why me and Dr. Kai-Fu Lee, he is an AI scientist, investor, also running a venture capital, Sino Venture. So back in the day, we both worked for Google China. And like 2 years ago, he reached out to me and came up with this idea, like, why don't we collaborate on a book based on the very solid, concrete fact of science and technology, like how AI was developing nowadays, and make the plausible speculation according all this kind of technology life cycle roadmap, and let's make the prediction of the next 20 years and see what's going to happen. And it's a book combines science fiction and nonfiction, so that's what makes it so interesting. So this is the book AI 2041, 10 Visions for Our Future, just coming out last month in both US and UK market and got a lot of attention and reviews. So there are 10 stories set in 10 different cities in 10 different countries over the next 20 years. And it's all about AI implementation and application in different industries. For example, entertainment, medical care, also education, also like military and job market. So I'm gonna show a little bit of one of the
in a virtual reality game. He lives in Brazil. I live in China. Soon, we were messaging all day and night. After 2 years, he wants to meet in person. But how can we meet when I'm afraid to leave my apartment? Outside these walls, the pandemic rages on, a permanent threat. AI helped discover vaccines, but the virus mutates fast. Inside these walls, I'm safe. The building's robots bring me everything. Does a relationship require contact? What is love for the COVID generation? This is AI 2041.
So this is the story set in Shanghai. So I imagine a future which human beings still need to coexist with the virus. With the help of AlphaFold, we can predict the protein structure and to accelerate the speed of developing vaccine and medicines. And also with digital human, we can accurately tracing everyone's behavior in a metaverse. And also with biosensors attached to our skin, everyone can easily show their healthy status and also vaccine status. You don't have to do the COVID test from time to time, and you don't need to show your QR code from time to time. So in this story, actually, we try to design a society which, with the help of AI technology, that people can really be prevent from getting infected, meanwhile still stay connected, no matter it's in physical world or in virtual world. So we would love to explore what's the meaning of relationship and connection in the post-pandemic age. So that means like humanity is something more interesting rather than science and technology. So this is just one of the case. There are some others. For example, my hunting idol was set in Korea, Japan, which is so famous for its fandom and idol industry. So in the future, entertainment will leverage technology as AR, VR, and XR, also with digital twins, which we can make a copy of anyone you love as a celebrity. And also the natural language processing can allow us to have this kind of fluent, smooth dialogue with this kind of a virtual idol. So it's a ghost story and also a detective stories. It's about how can we have this kind of fully customized idol in a hyper immersive media environment, and how to avoid people got too addicted to it. And this is the one who happened in the education system, which set in Seoul, Korea. So two orphan twin boy was adopted by different families. With the help of AI companions, that is allowed us can have the kids enjoy this kind of customized educational resources equally. That's how we gonna break through the exacerbate of class divisions. So because right now it's a huge problem in the real world, So with the narrative, with the storytelling, we're able to create this kind of parallel futures within different cultural backgrounds and to resonate with people. So what's more, like all the other guests speak of previously, there's so many problems happening all around the world nowadays, like climate change and species extinction, autonomous weapon, job displacement, social inequality, aging issue, indigenous people, culture preservation, mental problem, etc., etc. So there's so many challenges ahead of us beyond the realms of science and technologies. So it requires our belief and consensus from humankind to think and act beyond binaries and boundaries. So can science fiction play a role as the interface to inspire and mobilize people, especially the younger generation, to shaping a future-oriented mindset in society and culture for sure. So also the collaboration not only happen between different disciplinaries, like I'm the writer and Dr. Kai-Fu Lee is a scientist and investor, but also we try to expand the storytelling from only literature, but to more multi-medium format, such as NFT. So we're collaborating with TR Lab, one of the latest and famous emerging NFT platform, who was successfully auction Mr. Cai Guoqiang's firework NFT at $2.6 million this year. So we have invited 10 different international digital artists from all over the world to create some artwork of NFT based on the story in the book. So for example, this is the one by Brendan Dawes. It's called Ultimate Service for Your Happiness. It was inspired by one of the story called Isles of Happiness, set in Middle East, Qatar. So it's about how human in the future try to use AI and technology to measure the happiness of human being and try to maximize and optimize our mental status. So this is the artwork he created based on the story. And this is another artwork from Ash Thorn. So it's based on another story about medical care in the book, Contactless Love. So as you can see, there's so many machines, cables, and androids in the picture, and make people really think about what's the binary, what's the boundary between human and machine, life and algorithm. So this is also the artwork from Ash Thorn. So with all this kind of intermediate collaboration, I think we're able to expand our storytelling to younger generation, and even those who didn't want to read science fiction or any other kind of books before. So also we give a lot of talks on tech, Montreal this year, and Lake Quick about art, AI, and literature, and also SOSV Climate Tech Summit, and also AI Summit this year. So it's like we try to create this kind of consensus, not only limit to the book, but also this kind of conversation between different disciplinaries and domains. This kind of conversation might gonna build up some kind of consensus, like future is not only about science and technology, it's always about humanity, and always how people try to leverage and respond to the external change, and how we can empower all this individual and cultures and society with our tools, especially for those vulnerable groups, for example, the elder generation, indigenous people, sexual minorities, and handicapped people, because all of those might losing their voice and power within this so-called progress is like acceleration of the way pushing people forward. But what about those who was left behind? So one of the very interesting review actually is from education system. Dr. Joshua Kim, actually his review is quite important to me. He said the format of AI 2041 is one that should be followed by more writing teams and perhaps even by academic thinking about curricular innovation. This approach could and should inspire effective pedagogical choices and storytelling narrative techniques in MOOCs on emerging tech topics. It's an elegant method for looking back from the future and quickly juxtaposing with a look forward from the present. So he's the one director of online program and strategy at the Dartmouth Center for the Advancement of Learning, and also senior fellow at Georgetown University. So that's why I think it totally makes sense, as Yuval Noah Harari mentioned earlier when he received the interview from Wired magazine. He said, today, science fiction is the most important artistic genre because it can help people to respond to the uncertainty and anxiety of the outside world. And all this kind of change was mostly brought by technology. So that's the case. So this is what I'm gonna share today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chen Qiufan. There are several 3 minutes left, and my recent research about speculative design and design future. So I'm very curious about your topic, especially when you, as a writer, science fiction writer, not a fiction designer. So, and I'm very curious about very timing question, the AI 2041. I mean, I know the design fiction will distinguish several futures, like the near future, the far future, or the middle-term future. So why you choose 2041 instead of other timing?
Right, because after discussing with Dr. Kai-Fu Lee, we think 20 years is somehow appropriate time frame to make the prediction, because if that was too long, maybe there'll be some technology breakthrough happening, for example, quantum computation, that will totally like be revolutionary and change the whole paradigm. But if that was too close, there's nothing to predict, because maybe it will become true like within years. So for example, the books still like being translated into other language, like over 15 languages right now. So people in different country and area, people might read it in different times. So maybe when they got the book, it's already out of fashion. So that's something we don't want to see. So I think 20 years is something we feel comfortable with on this page. Yep.
It's a very smart option. I guess I have one question last, is that how do you cooperate with Li Kai-Fu, Mr. Li Kai-Fu? I mean, he's the AI expert, and you are a famous science fiction writer. I mean, how do you do the different part about this book?
Right, we spend a lot of time discussing, and we also interviewing a lot of scientists, researchers, scholars, and entrepreneurs who really running the AI company, and we gonna sit down and put this kind of all the technology like 15 or 20 technologies like deepfake, GAN, computer vision, etc., from easiest and to the most difficult, and from the nearest to the furthest. So we need to package different technologies into each story, and we try to create a story according to this kind of technology points. And that means I need to find a very appropriate cultural background to better match the technologies. So that cost me a lot of time, because I need to sweeping all over the world to find a very solid place, a very specific city and the cultures. I need to do a lot of studies and make sure it is perfectly matched with each issue. For example, the first issue is happening in Mumbai, India. So we're talking about AI insurance and finance. So it's also tap into the caste system in Indian society. So it's all about inequality and bias and discrimination. So that's how we're gonna work together and packaging all these technologies into different stories. So my job is mostly on imagination and finding all this kind of perfect match on cultural perspective.
Okay, thank you. Sounds very interesting, and very looking forward to your new book. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chen Qiufan.
Thank you so much.
Now, we have finished the part of our panelists. Next, we will welcome another keynote speaker, Professor Wang Minan from Tsinghua University. And his main research fields are critical theory, cultural studies, modern art, and literature. Professor Wang Minan is also a scholar, which I respect very much. I have been following and learning many of Professor Wang's works since I was a PhD candidate. Today, Professor Wang Minan will talk about technology and potential. Let's welcome Professor Wang.
Professor Wang, could you unmute yourself? Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, moderator. Thank you very much for the invitation and the introduction. Today, I'm going to talk about something related to technology. The previous two speakers already talked something about technology, so I would like to continue from there. They've talked a lot about very big issues and one about AI, so I would like to connect my topic with their speeches. So today I would like to talk about technology. So technology has already become something that is very, something that is concerned and discussed much about in the theory and the philosophical world, and the risks and the crisis brought by technologies have already been doubted from Thoreau, but it is a very romantic doubt and a questioning, because he believed technology will put civilization and morality or ethics worse. But from the perspective of philosophy, we have started from Heidegger in the 1930s and the 40s. He talked about technology, which was going to cause catastrophic threats. So like the professor from Italy said, the Earth will be put in crisis due to the progress of technology. For me, I'm going to talk about that. It's quite closely related to Heidegger, because today, not long ago, a French philosopher Stigler passed away not long ago. He talked a lot about technologies. He wrote a lot of books especially philosophical books and the 3 volumes talking about technology and the practices. So here, I would like to share with you his insights. So Stiegler, how did he talk about technology? So he regarded the technology as a very unusual thing. He looked at the technology as an organ of the human being. So the human body itself was something with deficiency. If the human do not have a technology, it will not survive in the world. So the nature or the core of human being is that the carrier of technology. Without this external organ of the human being, so human will not be human. For Stiegler, technologies are external organs of mankind. So it has to, the technologies should be integrated with the internal organs of the human being, or human beings could not survive. Without the external organs, the human beings will not survive, or there will not be any human beings left in the world. So this is the fundamental observation of Stiegler. So which means that technologies are external organs of the human being. Human being is the carrier of technology. So for Heidegger, technology should be like the start of the like the conquering of the grounds. But for Stiegler, his understanding about technology is that it has been connected with the human body. Instead of looking at technology as a tool to extravagate or extract the ground. So this is the basic difference there. For this technology, for Stiegler, the technology is evolving. Technology has its own history. So that's about that technology changes with time. When technology changes, or when technology has become history, human beings are the integration of external technology and internal organ. If we put it that way, so when the external organs are changing, which means that when the technologies are changing, they're going to lead to the changes in the human beings, which means that the lives are changing. If the technologies are changing all the time, the human beings and the lives will change all the time. For individuals and the lives, they do not have a very constant feature. So according to Stiegler, or there is another, Stiegler was affected by another philosopher. There is no constant individual, but there are only individualized process which are changing all the time, which means life is connected with the technology and which is changing all the time. So this process cannot be stopped. When life is changing all the time, it's a process that is changing all the time. There is no permanent humanity, and there isn't a permanent nature of mankind. If we're going to understand mankind, we need to understand it in changes because it is changing all the time. Then we talk about the changes of technologies and how the technologies are changing. So we are asking how the technologies are changing. Generally speaking, the changes of technology, especially today, so we see very clearly that the changes of technologies are accelerated in the early days. We don't talk about the technologies in the agricultural era, because they're very permanent, they are quite constant. There wasn't any change there. But in today's era, the iteration of technologies has been accelerated because of the combination of mankind and technologies. Then the individualized process will be changed at a faster pace, and the human beings are becoming more evolving and changing. So that's what we talk about. That's where we talk about intergenerational gaps, and those gaps can change very often. So in the 1970s or the 80s, we don't talk about those intergenerational gaps very much. But according to Stiegler, it is not because we have the intergenerational gap because the changes of technology. So each generation are using different technologies. That's reason why in today's era we talk about the intergeneration gap. So one generation is absolutely and totally different from another generation. So that's the first change. The second change I would like to talk about is the feature caused by technological change. The second change is that there is a reverse trend. From one perspective, especially today, especially the technology since the industrial era. So the capacities of us has been greatly strengthened. Our body has been enhanced. Now, one worker with the use of the machines, they can improve the productivity of the land through the lifter, so we can improve our productivity and the construction of the buildings. And also with the technologies, we can enhance our vision. Technologies are now exerting a very significant impact on the human body. So that's the reason why we have to develop technologies. That's one of the reasons why we should promote the progress of technology, because they can enhance our capacities. On the other side, we should talk about that it also poses threats to us. We can see that very clearly. So the individualization is moving towards another very negative side. For Stigler, what we are talking about is one thing that in today's era, how technologies are threatening the capacity of human beings, how it leads to the loss of capacity and the loss of agency of human beings. On the one side, technology can enhance ourselves. On the other side, it will cause us to lose our agency and the capacity. To put it in a simple way, how technologies are weakening our capacity. Of course, we can see very clearly it is enhancing our capacity. On the other hand, how technologies are weakening us. So we don't talk about the technologies from the agricultural civilization, but in the industrialized civilization, in this era of industrialization, especially since 19th century, we have seen the emergence of the mass production by machines. The workers in the 19th century, they become machines. According to Marxism and other thinkings, like Marcuse, they talked a lot about that the people in the 19th century and as well as the negative impact from the use of machines. Because of the use of machines in the industrial process, the workers have become a very single-sided person. They controlled the machine, but actually, fundamentally, they are controlled by the machines. But the arms are waving, are moving together with the rhythm of the machines. And machines are a part of the assembly of the machines. They're not only, so machines are impacting the bodies as well as the soul and the spirit of the machine. So humans were as rigid and individualized as the machine. So the interconnectivity among people were loosened, more fragmented, passive. The abundance of the individuality and the personality have been flattened and weakened. So that's about the single-sided person they talked about. Automation or semi-automated. Automated and semi-automated machines are the long-term paralysis and the slavering of the human beings. So human beings became ever more tired with the use of machines. So for such kind of workers, they were using the ways of machines to think and to live and to conduct their behavior. So they will not they won't use a critical way to think about things. They don't have imaginations, love, hatred, no spare time. They totally became tools and machines. Marcuse said, if human beings became like this, they were the slaves in the industrialized era. He said, the slaves have been valued, but they're still slaves. They were still slaves. According to Marxism, about the mass production with machines and the impact on workers, how workers became the slaves in today's era. And the Stigler said, of course, his observations were a bit different. He said that the handicrafts person or the workers who used the machines, according to Stigler, they were not just slaves. They've lost knowledge. They didn't have any knowledge, which means that they didn't know how to work. They lost the knowledge of work. They lost the skills of work. If you spend all the days and all your time with the machines, it was very difficult for you, like the people before, to make creations, to create something that belongs to you.
So you will be merely a spare part of the whole machine. So in that sense, that's why we say that for the modern industrial revolution, which has led to the large machine production, that led people to forgot their labor memory and the labor knowledge. So that's why that we say that it is the people who lost their ability of the labor. So that's why we can call it like is correction of what we have but in the 20th century, besides the proletarians, it's not like the big machine of the 19th century has disappeared. But based on that, there are some leading technologies appearing in the 20th century. For example, media technology. For example, TV, broadcast, newspaper, digital events. So all this, on the one hand, it will expand the horizon of our ideas. On the other hand, it has also made us that to further lost. So for example, if we lose our ability to labor in the 19th century, in 20th century, it has made us to lose more knowledge about life. We don't know how to live our life. In the past, that I think that it means the new proletariat, we cannot create or innovate our life, because for our life, we already know that all these values of the life has been provided by the media, newspaper, TV, movies. They tell us how to live, and they back and forth and teach us how to live. So more importantly, the life here I'm referring to is about how to consume. So that means the media technology will let us know that the lifestyle they provide us, the consumption style they provide us, no matter it's the material or spiritual or the cultural, all of them have been led or manipulated by the media. So media has created the value proposition we have, or even the ideological ideas. In that sense, in life, consumption, or even in ideas, that we have already become hollow and vague. And the values we have, the memories we have on the traditional ideas, the traditional lifestyles, with the current media technology, it has disappeared. Custom-based knowledge, memory, value proposition has been destroyed by the media technology. So in that sense, in the concepts, ideas, the media technology, if they are combined together, or that we have also emptied us. So to a certain sense, we have become a proletariat. In the third stage, the 20th century, the media technology has developed so fast, and it is over every aspect of life. But for the digital technology, it has also become an overshadowing technology. especially the internet technology. It made us systemically become the proletarian. We have the digital lifestyle in our production, consumption, and we all rely on the digital technology. Everything has been turned into the digitalized, or even our intelligence has been turned digital. So it's no longer about the production by the big machines in the 19th century or the ability to do the labor. Now that we have been totally become that manipulated. And also we have been producing on that. We have already become the digital code. We are symboled on that. So each of us, we have an answer, we have a number on that. But nowadays, you can see that, especially for the cell phone memories, to a certain extent, it has totally replaced about this traditional text by words. Actually, it means that it's a super memory. We use it to remember everything. So we can use this cell phone, this kind of the new technologies, or we can use all kinds of the new media and to meet that this kind of the martial art, we can listen, we can see, and we can have all the miracle functions as we have. But on the other hand, what we have lost is about the organic memory abilities. So in other words, that once the memory has become weakened, people has become more and more. Because we will think that all the memory have been turned into the statistic and technology. Without the memory, we cannot remember at all. So for example, when we were young, we try to remember all the telephone numbers. And also many of my friends that we remember their phone number, but nowadays you don't remember any phone number at all. In the past, we also remember any of the routes, how to get from one place to another place. But nowadays, you don't know. You have navigation, you have GPS everywhere. And even you don't remember how much deposit, how much money you have in your account. So for the very basic physical memory has all been turned into the digital and cell phones. We use the technology to help us to remember everything. But also at that time, it also means that for our body memory, we turned everything. But that means that we have lost everything. So that means the digital technologies has also make us that forgot our memory. So for example, like for the doctors, that they don't need a lot of the memory, they don't need about the sense. So all these memories, it has already been turned into the machines. And now for the doctor that they examine the patients, they can rely on all the equipment. The difference between the new doctor and old doctor is that the old doctor rely on the experience. But for the new doctors, they rely on the database and also all the machines. Everything has been turned into the digital. It has been remembered in our machine. So that means without the cell phone and computer, we don't know everything. We cannot work. And also without the equipment, without the laboratory, we cannot work. So in other words, that laboratory for science, it is even be more important than the specific scientists. Scientific equipment is more important. And also, with all these ideas, we can have the virtual achievement of the science and technology without this scientists' engagement. So that means that the digitally, that the computer ability, all of them has disappeared. And without that, people will become very anxious. So that's why nowadays, if you don't have the cell phones, but it seems that you cannot work, it cannot that live actually. So that's why we say we can become the cell phone people. So it's not the proletarian here we are referring. It's not like someone who doesn't have money or wealth or fortune, but it means that we don't have our labor, we don't have our knowledge or memories. We lost everything. We have become a new digital proletariat. All in all, that we are deprived of the memory and we rely on the computer and the cell phone to remember everything. So in that sense, that is a stigma for what he means that the technology has brought the difficulties, that for the individual ones, that all of them, it has led to the risk. So for the people, actually, people have become into the simple, stupid people. This is what we call the systemic stupidity. So in the past, we don't have the labor ability, and now we have the integrated or holistic stupidity. But of course, that for the digital memory compared with other kind of memory, there is another feature. It helps people that to remember everything because cell phone can remember everything for us. But on the other hand, this is something that we didn't have in the past. It can proactively record our body, everything from our body. So that means every moment that is not only about our behaviors, it's also about our psychological behavior. All of them have been recorded. So on the other hand, that this technology is not only that we use it to memorize everything. Cell phone has remembered everything. It has also remembered ourselves. So that's why that people have disappeared about the series, and also that you are something that very transparent. So that's why everything that we have been remembered. So that's why that when it is the digital memory is connected to our world, it has also make us that live together, and also we live in a very transparent way. So actually that is not only about the good medicine, that's like we said, it can cure us, but it also poisons sometimes. It impacts our life. So for example, like when we have more of this kind of technology, then people start to think about that, how we can have that. So I think that for Marx, that when he is talking about what is the nature of the technology, for Marx, it says the technology actually that is the internal and the externality of the internal world. So that means that for the technology itself, it is also can extravagate the people's internal potential, and also it will also be externalized. Since we can fully explore this potential, it will also become very objective. For example, a table. Of course, that for many people, it includes everyone will produce a different table. And also for the construction workers, when they decorate the room, it has also shown about the potential and the nature of that. So people's potential, people's nature, all of them can be seen in the technology itself, as well as the product itself. So this is what we call the externality of the internal nature of the human beings. So that's why that the technology can be achieved. People use technology to prove their potential. So technology is an expression of people's potential. And also because of people's potential, it goes beyond of the nature of animal. And the difference between human being and animals is that people have potential. Therefore, each of its potential can be seen into the technological development. On the other hand, to achieve the technology, it is also to help with a potential. This process has never stopped. It doesn't mean that when there is a potential to be achieved, it stopped. On the contrary, when the potential has been developed, people or human beings will explore more potential. So it is a very dynamic process. Technology itself cannot be stopped. I'm sorry, the time is up. Okay. Maybe you can do an ending. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Maybe I will talk about 2 minutes. The potential. So in that words, that when we talk about the potential, Aristotle once said there are two kinds of potential. The first one is to achieve the potential. The second one is that where the potential exists, however, it may not be achieved. So there are two kinds of the potential. It can be done, it can be achieved, but after it is achieved, it disappears. But when the potential is not achieved, it will always be there. So for example, that we say we need to have the two potential to be fully employed. The first one is to do and to accomplish with a technology improvement. Another potential is that the potential is there, no matter whether you do or not, to keep the status. I think that it will also help us to keep the potential to status of that. And I think that will be a very good way to achieve that. We can have certain technologies. We can also achieve the technology, but we can keep that ability. And then I think that we can also, like they said, we don't work. So this is also something that we want to explore this technology. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, Mr. Professor Wang. Actually, your criticism about technology, although you don't have a PPT, but our schedule is very set. So thank you very much. Okay, I think you start at 5:15, 5:25. You have been talking about 30 minutes. Okay, thank you very much. Because I thought I was required to speak for 30 minutes. Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor Wang. And indeed, just like the views shared by today's other guest, technology is indeed a very important dimension that determines our future and the prosperity of humankind. All right. So thank you all the speakers and the participants in today's session, and thank you for watching. And please continue to join us in the next part of International Conference on Design Future 2021. Thank you, everyone. And now, next session will be transferred to which one? 下面的议程是哪位老师？
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor Zhang Li. Okay, yes. Thank you for the session moderator, Professor Zhang Li, and thank you all for your wonderful lecture from the Futures Philosophy. Let's move to the next session. Now we will welcome the Dr. Liu Yuqi. And she is the project manager of Design Futures online course welcome Dr. Liu to launch the Design Future online course. Hi, you can hear? Dr. Liu? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I opened the PowerPoint. Wait a minute. Okay, you can go. You can go on.
Yeah, I can see. So okay, I will start now. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. It's my great honor to be invited to 2021 International Conference on Design Futures in presence of Professor Zhijie YAO to announce the Chinese version of Design Futures course. The English version of this course is generated by Professor Peter Gidley, an associate professor in Carnegie Mellon University. Next page, please. My name is Zhijie YAO. I'm the project manager of Design Futures online course. Since today is the launch of Chinese version, please allow me to use Chinese to share my presentation. Considering there are many international guesters and designers today, if you are interested in this course, please refer to the link which presented in this page and contact with Professor Peter Gidley. Now I will share my content in Chinese. Next page. 好的，各位尊敬的来宾、同仁、老师及同学们，大家下午好。
Distinguished guests, classmates, and students and the teachers, it gives me great pleasure that on behalf of Professor Zhijie to introduce you the introductory course of Design Futures. I'm Liu Yuqi, the project manager of this online course. For you to have a better understand about the context of this course, first of all, please have a look at one video. Please play the video.
Ah, 可以吗？这个视频播放。好的，没问题，没问题。就是没有声音呢，怎么没有声音？
There's no sound.
Sorry, 我重新来一下。
How about rewind and start again?
For most of human experience, we lived in societies where past, present, and future was about the same. But a couple of hundred years ago, we began to live in worlds where there was such rapid change that people became uncertain. We are moving into an era of technological change that is well beyond anything we ever had before.
Would that be okay? If you're a teenager today, there is no future of money, there's just money, and it comes out of smartwatches. But sooner or later, your grandma is going to press the wrong button on her email, and all of her money is going to be transferred to somewhere in Eastern Europe.
If we are using media to create multiple and competing social realities, then we are imperiling the future of what counts as a fact.
What jobs are going to be safe? What are machines not going to be able to do? What's going to be left for humans to do?
I have 4 kids. They need to learn a different trade.
The future of work, what home is, what facts are, what money is, what food is, you should not assume it's going to be the way it has been. The tsunamis are coming, the waves are coming.
They're rushing in faster than we can make a decision about what's good for us and what's bad for us.
We can either ignore them and be wiped away, or we can become a surfer, study them, and surf them.
The worst thing you can do right now is nothing. Don't be the guy who refuses to look at the future.
好的，非常感谢主持人的。
Thank you very much for playing the video. After the video, I believe that you will have a better understanding about the context of the designing of this online course of design futures. For futurist, Herbert A. Simon said that everyone designs who devises courses of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones. Futurist William Gibson said, the future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed. So here I would like to welcome you to join us in this publishing event of this introductory course of Design Futures is divided into 5 parts: the introduction of the teachers, introduction of the course, introduction of the keywords, and the introduction of the objectives of the course, and lastly, the introduction of the curriculum of this course. So the presenters of this course are Professor Zhijie YAO, who is responsible for the Design Futures research group of the Academy of Arts and Design of Tsinghua University, and the PhD supervisor and the associate professor of the Department of Information Arts Department of Tsinghua University, as well as the Deputy Director of Tsinghua University, China, Italy Design Innovation Base, is responsible for the undergraduate courses relating to the interactive design, service design, and the design thinking, as well as the fields relating to the smart products and the service design, as well as the design of the future cities. And we have Professor Peter Scupelli, who is the associate professor of the Learning Environment Lab of Carnegie Mellon University. He also has introduced the design into these 2 areas of the adjusting of short-term designs as well as the long-term planning, so as we can adjust our views. And also in this designing spirit and actions, he also instructs how to include the gender equality sustainability into our daily life so that we can redirect to sustainable development. And for the introductory course of Design Futures, so this is a MOOC course launched on ZHANG of Tsinghua University. It will be provided by Professor Peter Scupelli, and then also based on the flipped classroom of Design Futures, based on the translations, adaptations, eliminations, additions, and restructuring. This is an open source course so that we can have more and share the theories and practices with the designers. It has 7 chapters, and each chapter will have the instructions at the class, discussions, activities, the tests, expanded reading and design practices, but also include video links, pictures, texts, papers, and etc. In order for you to have a better understanding about the objective of the course, first of all, I'd like to introduce you 3 keywords of this course. The first is design. So the design has been emphasized in the dictionary that it is the appearance, function, and the way of operation, but there is another view. So in 1969, that design is a different action plan that it aims to change the existing situation to something that we want. So this definition has shifts from objects and impacts to more broadly cover preferred situations. The preferred situation is much broader than object or communication, and includes the impact of design as broadly as defined. The second keyword is design, but here it's a different design. S has been replaced by X. So it is an experimental type of design that integrates future thinking with design thinking, proposed by Arnold Wasserman. So It was so it is to signify an experimental form of design, the design education, combining design thinking with futures thinkings to align near-term design action with long-term and long-range vision goals, while navigating uncertainty and accelerating innovation toward desired futures. So the course focuses on learning design methods to align near-term design action with long-term time horizons aimed at sustainable futures. So the third keyword is future. So here the future we have added an S. So future, it is a plural. So we don't have a single future. So it will explore this there is no such thing as a single future. Futures are always plural. Futures studies explores possible, plausible, probable, and preferable futures and their underlying worldviews, myths, cultures, and metaphors, just like futures are plural. So is the past. There are multiple stories and the perspective of what happened. The multiplicity of the stories and futures are influenced by one's values, cultures, genders, experiences, and the perspectives. The past, present, and the future are interconnected. The present becomes past as futures become present. The past influences our perceptions of the past, and the future present decisions can make some futures more likely or unlikely. So the below are the objectives of teaching. The first of all, designers to understand their new role. And secondly, we are going to learn about the tools, resources that we need for change, to promoting the active change of the earth. And we're going to expand from the human-based thinking to designing for the future. The fourth is that we're going to make a breakthrough of the traditional things that designers can do. Fifth, we're going to criticize the future visions as well to identify new opportunities. Six, we're going to combine the design concepts and the design of the future spaces, as well as the power of change, as well as to relate it with the future situations. And seventhly, we're going to learn about how to find the multiple design opportunities in the alternative future. This one is that. So we are going to map the design projects into the near-term, medium-term, and long-term range. Nicely, we're going to learn about how to navigate in uncertainty so as to accelerate the arrival of innovations in the desired future. So those are the curriculum. It includes 7 chapters. The first is to move towards the future. The second, the future narration and critical scenarios. The third one is the alternative future. Fourth, the power of change. Fifth, the hierarchies of change. And the sixth, the future signals. And the seventh, the experience-based future. And we are going to have a test in the end. To be more specific, the first chapter is to move toward the future. So it will include the Anthropocene and the impact of the human beings to the earth, as well as that designers should care about the future and to walk towards the future. They should understand design thinking, the difference between present and the future. The second chapter is about future narration and the criticizing of scenarios. So it will based on different medias and the representation of future scenarios, as well as the principles, as well as the criticizing of the future scenario. So it will bring together the elements to criticize in a deeply way. And the third one is alternative future. So it will explore the possibilities of alternatives. For example, it will focus on the growth, collapse, discipline, transformation, as well 2x2 scenario matrix and its related concepts. The fourth chapter is about the power of change. It will introduce the STEEP concept and its theoretical contents. The concept of future triangle as how to use it and the application of STEEP theory in the present, in the future, and in the past. The fifth one is the hierarchies of changes that will discuss the different perspectives of future, the PACE levels, and the sheer level frameworks and the differences and the relations. And the sixth basic concepts of future thinking and the pillars and the 6 main questions and the CLA concepts and its application. Next slide. The 6th chapter is about the manifestations of future, so it will not only include consumerism and the minimalism, the future signals of the signals of futures and how to design the options and plans. Chapter 7 is the experience-based future. It will include WBCSD 2050 vision and its way and the path of realization, explorative future scenarios, the normative future scenarios, disruptive innovation, and how to create a better experience-based future. And in the practice component, in order for you to learn about the theories as well as application of the theories and the design tools, so we will take a Moscow city as this practice for the teams to complete. So this will be the first solar-driven eco-city, which is located in Abu Dhabi of UAE, which has been compared to a utopia in the desert. It is this exploration of the environment and the survival in this very extreme conditions. So we have to note that for all those who have registered in teams, so they are going to finish this chapter and the practices with the help of the TA, and they are going to have a presentation about the design. And for those individual students, they can also understand to choose this module because of the limitation of this online learning. So we don't make it mandatory for the individual students. For them who would like to join the team, so they can get in contact with the TA and our lecturer. So in order for you to have a better understanding and the knowledge about how to register with this course, we've developed a very simple video for you to have a look at this course, how to apply for this course and register with this course. So in this search, you can search for the introductory course and click confirm. So you can search for it and you can find this course in the system, and you click the menu to go to the web page. In this web page, on the left side, you are going to see the title of this course as well as when this course will be open and the number of students who have registered with this course. And you click the learning and you are going to see we have this free learning and you can join the free learning. And to make application, let's come back to the homepage of this course. By scrolling down, you're going to see the introduction of the course, the schedule, detailed information, organizations, information and the profiles of the lecturers. And in the chapters of the course, it's divided into 7 chapters. Before we start, we're going to have a quiz. And after the learning, we'll have a summary and outlook and the end of term examination to understand how do you learn the progression of your learning. So if you are going to use the mobile phone as your learning tool, you can search for 学堂在线, which is an app, so that you can also search for the course on the app. So let's join hands to embark on the journey of learning for design futures.
好的，非常感谢主持人对我们这个报名方式的视频播放。那么目前呢，我们的
Thank you for playing this video. And this course is on 学堂在线, the MOOC platform of Tsinghua University for those who are interested, and the students and designers. You can go to 学堂在线, the MOOC platform of Tsinghua University, to search for our course. And we are looking forward to meet you on this course. And thank you very much for the listening to our introduction of the launch of this MOOC course.
Okay, I need. Okay. We look forward to the development of design future online course. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
This is the end of the first part of today's conference. The second part of the conference will be e-plans about futures creation, and it's will beginning at 7 p.m. today. So in Beijing time, if you want know the more information about the conference, please scan the QR code on the screen. So, so let's take a break and see you at 7 p.m. So thank you all the people and the audience. Thank you.